sort of coming. Chapter 938. The old scholar was at the door and said, the junior Lu Xing paid a visit to Master Lu. The two parties reunited after a long absence, one called Brother Shizhou and the other called himself a junior. Because the scholar and the Taoist priest didn't use their heartfelt words, the girl heard it really, and her brows instantly frowned. Master Lu taught. Master. Is this young Taoist who claims to be Xianshu Tangsha actually a man of the world? Otherwise, who would dare to establish a religion for the mountain sect? It was just a pure martial artist, but the talisman on her shoulder was so heavy that she couldn't move. Could it be that the family has a deep family and rich wealth, and he bought it with the fairy master on the mountain with a lot of money? Lu Qin looked at the girl and nodded. The girl has a good vision, she didn't guess wrong. Except for a few tricks, Xiao Dao is actually a martial artist who does not show the mountains and the water. The phrase grandmaster is a vocabulary tailored for the trail. The veteran scholar smiled knowingly when he heard this. The third master of Baiyujing really wrote an article, The Great Master, but the time has changed, and eventually it has evolved into the honorary title of pure martial arts. The old scholar walked into the stove and sat opposite Lu Qin. He had already prepared an extra bowl and chopsticks on the table. Even the jug was 2 jugs. Obviously, he was to entertain the reunited deceased in a foreign land. Lu Qin asked curiously, how can sect Master Jiang be willing to let you leave the blessed land of the Cloud Cave? Lu Shi poured himself a bowl of wine and said with a smile, I had an agreement with Jiang Shang. After I came here to settle a relationship, I still have to go back and continue to be a punting boat. In the blessed land of the Cloud Cave, the pseudonym is Ni Yuanzhan, and he lives on a boat. Historically, in Huanggeji, one of the 18 scenic spots in Yunkus blessed land, an unknown ancient sword fairy once drank fine wine in the pavilion. In the end, when he was drunk, he hiccuped and spit out a sword pill. At the beginning, Cui Dongshan and Lao Zhouzi were in the boat crossing the river. The words of the two sides and the constant fighting, all revealed part of the identity of the other party. One is that the blue ox alone visits the jade fault, but leaves the yellow crane to guard the golden pill. One is the old dragon of the ancient Shu kingdom who Xing Jun drinks wine and persuades the dragon to go for it. The old master Hao, who is aliased as Ni Yuan Pin, was a monster in the Jade Pu realm that even Jiang Shangzhen was helpless when he was drunk. It feeds on the aura of heaven and earth. Lao Zhouzi, however, was able to use his unique magical powers and mysterious swordsmanship to defeat the monster by the Great Avenue, and finally beheaded it with a single sword, which was tantamount to erasing a confidant worry for Yunku Jiang's family. Lu Qin asked, Mr. Shizhou has never seen the girl from Sui who walked out of the picture scroll. If the poor memory remembers correctly, girl Sui was in Yugui's ancestor before becoming the true ancestor of Aquarius. She has been practicing on the mountain for several years, and she is only one step away from Mr. Shizhou. Why don't you meet your master and disciple? Wouldn't it be a good talk on the mountain if you could renew the old bond and restore the status of master and disciple in the vast world? Lu Xing shook his head and said, the predecessor and the predecessor, if you can stop in this life, you will stop, otherwise the next life will be a mess. When is the end? Lu Qin sighed and screamed, listening to the enlightenment of the monarch, I have awakened so many dreamers on the mountain. Lu Xing smiled and shook his head. Zhouzi talked about the sky and Lu Qin talked about dreams, they are all unique. Lu Qin lifted the wine bowl and shook it, his face was full of sadness, and his eyes lamented, when it comes to accepting disciples, the poor are ashamed of themselves. Those unsuccessful disciples, so far, no one has been able to get the best in the world. People's name makes me, a master, not popular wherever I go. Look at the old scholars, even if they are in the Qingming world, in that Xuandu temple, they are still my own children. Lu Xing couldn't laugh or cry. How could the number one person in the lotus flower blessed land be compared with Haoran, Lu Xing would never dare to wear the top hat taught by Zhang Lu on his head. Which of Lu Chen's direct disciples is not a master of Dao Fa? Just say that Chao Rong and He Xiaoliang, who stayed in the awe-inspiring world, are all fairyland that is expected to soar. In the lotus flower blessed land, in the Guandao temple, in addition to the host of Bixiao Dongzhu, there will occasionally be distinguished guests similar to the real person of Chunyang, and there is also the Tongis Hao, exile immortal, who has set aside to go to the blessed land and Hongqian to practice the heart of Taoism. In addition, the blessed land itself has no shortage of talented and amazing people. If it were not for the old masters to deliberately gather the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, and not allow the vulgar to practice, it is estimated that it will be like the Fizu spiritual blessed land, or the Jiang Shangzhen cloud cave blessed land. Early a large number of earth immortals have emerged, and in the history of the Uafuti, the pure martial artist who is recognized as the closest to the way of heaven is actually a woman. Sui on the right. She is a predecessor who can be highly respected by Hushan school usually. The world is turning around, ruling the roost in the arena, winning the title, and going round and round. In the view of the extremely high-spirited Eugenie, it is just a ghost hitting the wall. After all, it is impossible to escape the ordinary quagmire. Sui right is different. The woman back then, flying up with swords, handed out 3 swords towards the sky. Sui right-hand origin in Uafuti is actually quite good, a bit similar to the later noble son Zhu Lian, and her elders in the family are not illiterate, so how can she be so perfunctory on the matter of naming her? Of course, there are experts who have high hopes for the Sui right, hoping that she can find a different way and not be the same as the common people. The right on the right of the Sui dynasty was opposed to the Han Dan Dao's Ren. And the scholar who claimed to be Lu Xing in front of him was the evangelist of Sui right in the blessed land of learning, martial arts, and swordsmanship. As one of the protagonists of Huang Liang Yiming, Lu Xing, of course, hopes that his disciple Sui right will be able to make a difference in the future and walk out of a road different from himself. There are few pedestrians on the Sanqing road, and the side door is fighting to get in. The world has many divergent roads since ancient times. It is hard to see the gods. Lu Qin took a sip of wine, broke off a greasy chicken leg, and said vaguely, Pan Dao thinks that Sui girl will not have low achievements in the future. If I am Shizhou brother, even if it violates the old master's arrangement, I also want to give the golden pill to Miss Sui. With this help, Miss Sui Great Sword Fairy will be in her bag. If her luck is better, the fall of the lotus root flower in the early years will be the origin of the world. What we couldn't do back then can be made up in the future. Lu Xing said helplessly, if Master Lu interprets words in such a way, it would be a little bit suspicion of mechanically copying. Because the word Sui, if you don't talk about the origin of the surname, just follow the Confucian temple Shohu, the ancient meaning is the sacrifice left after the sacrifice. If you sacrifice, you will hide the Sui, so there are sages to add annotations, the corpse sacrifices the lungs and the spine of the millet. In addition, according to Su Fusis Xing of Zhaoling characters, the Sui character has a meaning of Chuiluo. Lu Qin smiled and said, really? Sui right side of the sword failed to ascend, and its shape was pierced, and the ashes disappeared. Doesn't it look like the first corpse of the lotus flower blessed land? It is precisely because of Sui right move. It was only then that Eugenius' ambition was later to turn from martial arts practice to mountaineering to cultivate immortals, determined to accomplish the unfinished feat of his predecessors. Eugenie really admired Sui right side. In the opinion of senior brother Yudo, once Qi Jingchun was the first to get the job done, it would be equivalent to Bai Yujing no longer having a master instructor, and no senior brother in the world. The brother Ko's name, for him, has the grace of accepting apprentices on behalf of teachers and teaching careers on behalf of teachers. Therefore, before Lu Qin left Bai Yujing, Yudo almost warned his younger brother in a warning tone. Lu Qin, if you dare to hesitate at the final moment, I'll do it. Afterwards, Lu Qin said that he didn't do anything. How to fool Lin Jingqing who can fool others, let alone fool Chen Ping, and Lu Qin only felt sad. He picked up his chopsticks again and muttered to himself, cultivation is a matter of breaking the sky, which is a nanty visitor. The girl at the door squinted. Lu Qin smiled and said, "What do you think?" The girl sneered, "There are not many people in the world who are qualified to speak such big words. Then being poor is for Big Brother, Sun Guanju, Xiao Tianshi, and others." Lu Qin smiled and said, "Right, hidden officer." Lu Xing was shocked when he heard the words. A sword repairman in the Jade Pure realm, his Dao heart was shaken, and he hadn't seen him for a few days. So does Chen Pingan have this knowledge of Taoism? Can you hide in a certain place and watch the mountains and rivers from a distance, leaving yourself unaware? So, the third head teacher of Bai Yujing in front of him, has he known it a long time ago? Deliberately hiding it from yourself? Glancing at Lu Xing, Lu Qin looked embarrassed and promised, "The sun and the moon can be learned, the conscience of heaven and earth, this matter has nothing to do with the poor road. Is it considered as digging a hole to bury yourself for temporarily lending to the young hidden official of the 14-realm Dao Fa? This matter today, if the Taoist son who was watched by the Xuanta knew about it, it would be fine, and he wouldn't be able to laugh at himself for hundreds of years and thousands of years." Lu Qin converged his expression, rare to be so serious, picked up a pair of chopsticks, and gently knocked on the tabletop. The table that was struck by chopsticks had ripples like running water, like a dream, true or false. Lu Qin took a deep breath. "I don't have wet shoes when I often walk by the river. It's terrible, it's terrible." The girl at the door seemed to be smiling but not smiling, raised her hand, and lightly flicked the talisman on her shoulder, and the talisman fell to the ground. She took a step back and her figure gradually dissipated. At the same time, the entire site of the Lu Zhu temple outside the kitchen room, as if there were hundreds of millions of tiny gaps, also began to fading. Little by little, restore the original appearance of the real mansion. The three-headed female ghosts, the wild cultivation of the mountains, the fighting methods, the inviting gods to the gods and the great immortals, all of them are illusions, and they simply don't exist. It's like someone wrote a story carefully for Lu Qin. Lu Qin laughed bitterly. Didn't the poor Wei get a dart for nothing? On the bank of the pool outside the Fen shrine, Qing Tong suddenly stood up from the bamboo chair and tremblingly said, "What did you do before I went out?" Chen Pingan was still sitting on the bamboo chair, maintaining the leisurely posture of fishing with a rod, and slowly said, "I didn't say that just now, let you watch the water temporarily." Qing Tong shook his head and said, "Impossible, even if you can fool me, how can you fool Lu Qin?" One accident, Qing Tong began to call the name of the third head teacher of Bai Yujing. Even in this vast world, Lu Qin could only walk the world with the ascending realm cultivation base. But Lu Qin is Lu Qin after all. What's more, like the Wuyue mountain monarchs who traveled around Suishan before, as well as the Shui Jun Li Yeho, he could perceive the existence of dreams almost instantly. Li Yeho once stood on the boundary between true and false dreams, and traveled casually. Then the whole dream was torn apart. Could it be that Chen Ping An's previous visit to Shuijun Li Yeho and his visit to the 5 sacred mountains of Middle-earth to worship the mountain tops had already given a secret act of respect? It's just that the more Qing Tong thinks about it, the more it feels impossible. Not to mention Master Lu, only that Lu Sheng was also a sword repairman in the Jade Realm. He only said that Lu Sheng was in the Lotus Roots, he was originally a scholar of heaven and humanity. Lu Sheng strayed into the mansion. After that, just glance at it casually, even if it is the kind of casual glance, it will still be subtle and deep in memory, and if it is wrong, you will notice the clues. Before and Chen Pingan traveled together to visit various dreams of water houses and mountain tops, but forcibly dragged the various landscape gods into the dreams, and there was no extra thing. But in the old Lugong temple site, Chen Pingon had set up the female ghosts, monks, and the two great immortals in the temple, as well as the 2 rows of swordsmen and soldiers in the corridor. The most important thing was them. They need to talk to themselves, and every time they speak, every action, and even every heartfelt voice, they need to conform to their identity, realm, and even their xinqing. In addition to those buildings that appear out of thin air, all the landscape needs to be carefully crafted in the subtleties, and the grandeur is in line with the geography. This means that in addition to being a storyteller who is good at composing stories, Chen Pingon needs to be a master builder, painter, calligrapher, and even women's clothing and accessories who are proficient in repair and civil engineering. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "Do you think the images you see in the pool are what happened right now? Even if you have deceived you. Besides, you think that you have deceived you, really only the water picture scroll. Why don't you turn your head? Take a look inside the Fen shrine." Qing Tong turned his head and glanced at the shrine. Suddenly a look of horror appeared on his face, and when he looked around, there were no anglers anymore. Qing Tong sat down on the floor. Because the bamboo chair that Chen Pingon handed over is also fake. The real Chen Pingon, standing in the corridor of the hall with his arms folded, surrounded by the little Taoists throwing coins to play, but the Taoists and coins are like frozen pictures. The most terrifying thing Qing Tong felt was not this, but it was like a picture scroll slowly spreading out, and the long river of time seemed to flow again, and there was a ringing sound on the side of the moon cave gate in the temple. Walking out of the 2 women, the woman is still in a bun with Chow Yun, and the girl is still in a light green skirt with a lotus root and white shirt. She is stepping on a pair of slightly old embroidered shoes, and the old woman in the temple, who wears a bamboo leaf robes, walks out of the moon gate together. The girl is still the same. He looked at someone from the corner of his eye. The only difference was that Lu Chen stood beside the former Qing Tong and replaced Chen Pingon. I saw the young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown with 2 legs like nailed, eyes dazzling, and finally calmed his mind. Then he moved aside and let the 3 women pass by, still following the 2 women and girls with different looks. The Taoist muttered silently, "Tao is pear blossom or not, Tao is apricot blossom or not, white and red, don't have the Eastern style." Then Chen Pingon spoke in his heart, "Lu Xin." These 2 words, the Qing Tong in the shadow of the willows outside the temple, are clear to the ears, and their complexion changes drastically if struck by lightning. Because Qing Tong had asked who was waiting before, at that time Chen Pingon just say, "Lu Xin." Lu Xin turned his head and gave a strong "oh," then Pai Dian ran to the corridor of the hall, hurried up the stairs, smiled brightly and said, "It is another dream that has spent a lot of merit, and it is also a sacrifice to life. Flying swords also need to consume golden body fragments, and even more effort on those details. The poor Wei will have to worry about the capital for the hermit. It's a loss in the old Lugong temple site, which has less than the number of hands. Dummy, once the word 9 is passed, then the cost of dream creation by the hidden officer is probably not as simple as doubling. Hard work, very hard work. Great, really great." Lu Qin turned around, squatted on the steps, wiped his face with his sleeves. "Okay, please enter the urn, catch turtles in the urn, 1,000-year-old tortoise, ba. Lu Qin said bitterly, "If this is spread, Pang Dao will have no face to go out and go out." Chen Pingon smiled and comforted, "I don't have any wet shoes when I walk along the river, and am used to it again and again." Lu Qin raised a hand, "Don't. Poor Dao doesn't want to have a second time. The king is in the urn like a dream, and the king is in the urn when he dreams." Chen Pingon just borrowed a place to build a big urn and let Lu Qin step into it on his own initiative. In the long-abandoned mansion in the city, there are actually few things, they are genuine. But in a sense, all the words and deeds of those female ghosts, wild repairs, and Insi gods are absolutely true. Especially the girl who was made from a 1,000-year-old peony, only said that she took the initiative to walk to the door of the stove and was close to Lu Qin, and all her words, expressions, voices, all kinds of mood swings, all heartstrings the voice, especially the story she compiled. Which word, which sentence, is not true for herself? Of course, to Lu Qin, it is true that it doesn't matter at all, that's why he takes it lightly. Otherwise, in the several worlds, apart from the 3 teaching ancestors who set the game himself, Lu Qin, let alone strayed into a dream, with Lu Chen's temper, it is estimated that Pakistan would not sleepwalk a few times. However, as a bystander, Qing Tong feels that his scalp is cold and his back is cold. Because it was like a big exam, the test paper was given, the answer was also given, and even the comments were given together, but Qing Tong still failed to understand all the joints. Just talk about this dream trip that I thought of as a tour of mountains and rivers. How many new ways did Qin Pingan, or Mr. Zhang, figure out? Lu Qin raised his head, looked up at the standing green-shirt guest, and asked with a smile, I implore the hidden officer to help solve the puzzle, who is it that shields the poor heaven's heart? If he hadn't lost the first move like this, Lu Qin would think that he would be stupid and slam into the dream world, and he wouldn't be aware of the impropriety so late. Chen Pingan smiled and said, It was the most sacred master who asked me to see off the guests and send out the teaching ceremony of Lu Zhang. Lu Qin suddenly realized that, he hurriedly stood up, and hurriedly hit the gate chief, with a sincere expression on his face, and muttered, The courtesy is heavy, the holy master is so polite. The little master can't do this kind of activity, it is really possible for the most sacred master to do it. Lu Qin sighed, Qin Pingan, shouldn't this kind of killer's skill at the bottom of the box be revealed so early? Are you afraid that the poor Dao will spread this thing all over by Yujing? Chen Pingan said, It's a rare opportunity to practice hands. I missed Master Lu today. Where can I find a monk in the 14th realm? Lu Qin stood on tiptoe and waved vigorously, friends of the same Daoist Qing, here and here. Qing Tong had no choice but to bite the bullet and walk into the Fen Shrine, but he didn't use the magical powers of Shudi Mountain and River. This kind of fairy fighting, which seems to be high in the sky, can easily hurt the pond fish. Lu Qin and Qing Tong explained with a smile, If it weren't for the strict rules of the Confucian Temple, I would only be allowed to visit the mountains and rivers of the 2 continents, otherwise I would definitely go to the town demon building before, fellow Taoists, don't mind. Qing Tong looked cautious and said, Of course I don't mind. The little road boys in the corridor began to throw copper coins again, all thinking about playing, innocent, innocent and innocent. The 2 women who came here to respect the incense also got on the carriage, and the old coachman yelled softly, and there was the sound of the wheels outside the temple. Holding a jade-wishing old woman from the temple, she returned to the shrine with a smile on her face, and added a considerable amount of sesame oil money to spend a good year. The shrine and temple will be celebrated next year when the spring begins. Can be done more generously. When Miaozhu saw the 3 pilgrims on the other side of the stairs, he nodded to them. The 3 in the corridor and the old woman also nodded in return, especially the young Taoist priest wearing a Taoist crown, and said with a smile, It is a good sign that pilgrims will come here to respect incense. The incense of our Fen shrine next year will definitely be indispensable. Hearing that, the old woman was in a good mood, and her expression became more kind, nodding and smiling, I wish the fellow Taoists all the best. After Miaozhu entered the Moon Cave Gate, Chen Pingan said, The Yunxia mountain has better results than I expected. Sure enough, Master Lu is still very sophisticated in doing things. Lu Qin said, Huang Zhongho is a good drinker. Next time I return here, I must find him for a drink. Chen Pingan nodded. Lu Qin asked, What are your plans next? Go back to see the Most Holy Master? Chen Pingan said, I may not be able to see it. and I plan to go to the Huangliang sect first. There is a ceremony there, and someone has already rushed over here on Luopa Mountain. It's impossible to wait until the day of the ceremony, but it's all in the dream. Lianghua, there is no reason not to go over and say hello. Lu Chen rubbed his hands and smiled. Do you mind if you want to join in the fun? Chen Pingan smiled and said, whatever you want. Chen Pingan said, then Zhang Jiaolu can get rid of the dream. Lu Chen blinked. Qin Tong is dumbfounded. Lu Chen stomped lightly. A Fen shrine actually disappeared. Qin Tong is already numb. Whatever you two toss about next. Chen Pingan said, it's almost ready, a dream is a dream, refreshing and refreshing. Lu Chen waved his sleeves again with a smile on his face. The three people in the corridor were still in the corridor outside the hall of Fen Shrine. Chen Pingan turned sideways and kicked over with a kick. Lu Chen jumped to the side and laughed. When Lu Chen's feet settled, the three of them had already arrived in the dilapidated mansion, just outside the small building. There were 3 coffins in the building. There were no dead bones and nothing inside. Lu Chen stood outside the threshold, folded his hands together, and said, coffin, coffin, promotion and wealth. In fact, Yamashita Market has absolutely no taboo about coffins, and will never feel that it is a bit unlucky. Otherwise, many elderly people in wealthy homes will not prepare a coffin for themselves early. As for the homes of the emperors, almost all emperors and monarchs will choose the address of the tomb before they are alive, start the construction, and prepare for the future. Chen Pingan said blankly, as long as Master Lu doesn't lie down, Master Lu will have no place. Lu Chen turned a deaf ear. Qin Tong was silent. The old scholar came here, smiled and shook his head, looking helpless. Chen Pingan held a fist and apologized, Master Ni, how offended it is. Ni Yuan Pin, or Lu Xing, smiled freely, Mr. Chen is so skilled, not to mention that there is no treacherous storm. It can be regarded as an unusual mountain journey, without spending money to watch it. Revolving lantern. Chen Pingan smiled and said, it's no wonder that Master Ne is a lot of courtesy when he is a junior. Ni Yuanzhan jokingly said, then the Taoist masters have the final say. Lu Chen's face was covered with the word grievances, and on the side of the master who was invited to enter the urn, the master of the urn, I didn't see Master Hermit that you were so polite and thoughtful. Lu Chen looked around, overgrown with weeds and lifelessness. He looked at it as if it was not as good as the previous dream. He couldn't help turning his wrist and sighed, good times are like birds, turning back into a story. Seeing this scene in this life, this body, here and now, is not a heart. Dressed in a green shirt. The return of the 5 sacred mountains was spotless, and the hundreds of cities were all empty. Lu Chen suddenly said, Chen Pingan, we met for the first time back then, is that count? Oh hello, poor words are too poor, how can this be good? Chen Pingan smiled and said, Master Lu wanted to say, we met 2 young boys for the first time. Lu Chen clapped his palms and smiled, I have never dreamed of going to Longzhou in my life. In front of Qingshan, I met 2 teenagers for the first time. Chen Pingan said, it turns out that good poems don't rhyme. Qin Tong and Lu Xing looked at each other, and they felt pity for the same illness. Why did you drink at the same table with Lu Qin? Why would you follow Chen Pingan? In the evening, at the gate of the Huangliang school, there is a long table with pen, ink, paper and inkstone on the table. Responsible for recording the names and mountain tops of the guests watching the ceremony. At the same time, it is also necessary to check the invitations and customs, which of course is to make a scene. Several visitors with strange faces came. The monks of the Huangliang school are not the kind of small sects with shallow eye sockets. Generally speaking, they can be recognized by the distinguished guests from the nearby hills and the surrounding countries. The head was a young man in a blue shirt and long coat with a gentle expression. I always feel that this person looks familiar, and the more I look at it, the more familiar. Next to this person was a woman wearing a power fence and a green robe. An old man in a Confucian shirt, and a young Taoist priest wearing a swimming fish crown, looked a little bit ridiculous. When walking, he liked to flip his sleeves. It was the young Taoist priest who stepped forward quickly and first gave out a gift, 2 Gu coins, and then the first one to write down the pen and write his name. The view of the gods, the Taoist priest Lu Fu. The young Taoist priest has not forgotten to add the 4 words in teeny lower letters, which is a degree of reward. After that, the 3 visitors who came together to congratulate each other also took out 2 grains of rain money, and then wrote the name and the top of the mountain. Tonggishao, Xiandu Mountain Kuching, Qingtong. The blessed land of Tonggishao Cloud Grottos, Gesh Qing Ni Yuan Pin. Luopa Mountain, the owner of the mountain, Chen Pin Gon. Sort of Coming Chapter 939. In the territory of Mengliang Country, the Huangliang School, which is the neighbor of Yunxia Mountain, is named Lushan and is located in Biei County, Huai'an Prefecture, Mengliang Country. Ever since the Huangliang faction bought a mountain peak to the west of the former site of Lizhu Dongtian, it seemed to have been losing luck all the time and began to turn to good fortune. In the early years, I used a bag of Spring Festival money as a way to buy money, and then used the remaining bag to win the money. The price of the clothing belt peak bought from the Dolly Court has doubled several times. Then the teacher Lu Hongwen, who was sent to Yidefeng for retirement, got acquainted with the Luopa Mountain. Chen Lingjun, the worshipper of the Luopa Mountain, is a very close drinking buddy. The uncle has also participated in several night banquets in the Beiyue Mountain. How can it be regarded as a familiar face with Wei Shanjun? In the words of my uncle, Lu Hongwen, at that Wei Shanjun's night banquet, the seats are in the front row, which time is not under yuaning, my position is the most front, just talk about the landscape gods sitting opposite me. Twice was the river righteous of the Xihua River, and once was the Zhou Chenghuangyi of Longzhou. In the Shanshui officialdom of the Dali Imperial Court, which one is worse? In the Mengliang country, even if the Wiyue mountain monarch with the highest rank, can he sit aside with the embroidered river god? After that, there was a descendant of the patriarch who had high hopes, and he really succeeded in making it into the Golden Core. This is how the Huangliang faction will celebrate the inauguration of the first month of the next year. 3 gold cores within 1 door. In addition, the disciple of the closed door who rested in the head, the one who went to the Lizhu cave to seek for no results, now there are signs that the bottleneck of the Dragon Gate realm has loosened. Earlier, Gaozhen had a gentleman's agreement with his uncle. Since uncle has really completed that gambling agreement, and indeed invited guests from Luopa Mountain for the Huangliang sect, then Yidefeng naturally doesn't have to sell it. Huangliangpai specially selected 2 neighboring mansions with the best scenery. The young man in Confucian shirt, named Li Huai, claimed to be from Shanaya Academy, and the yellow-clothed old man beside him seemed to be a follower. His name was Holu, and he did not have a surname. The Taoist name was Longshan Gong. On the top of Guan, it was shown that he was a casual xiao from Nanpa Suzhou. He had falcon-eyed and eagle-eyed eyes, but he wore a magnanimous robe. Since this pair of masters and servants were unexpected visitors, there was some speculation on the Huangliang faction. If you want to come to this college, most of them belonged to the tycoons at the foot of the mountain. Only when they were young, they had a monk to serve as a follower. At this moment, Li Huai was flipping through a book similar to Literati's notes in the house. It was a yellowed book that was picked out from the corner of the bookshelf. It was sealed with several seals, which seemed to be the collections of local literati in Mengliang country. Ordered, and there is a sticky note on the last 2 pages of the book, which roughly explains the origin of the book. It was obtained from a place called Fen Shrine and was a gift from the temple. Since Li Huai had the status of a scholar in academy, the Huangliang school gave such an elegant house. The plaque couplet, the four treasures of the study, and the Qing dynasty confession, have everything you need, and a few calligraphy cylinders are filled with scrolls of calligraphy and painting. Li Huai is actually very ashamed, but it's not easy to yell. In fact, I don't read much. The Taoist Nen was sitting on the threshold, like sleeping but not sleeping, digging into the ancient book, and the old blind man threw it to himself as rubbish. Unfortunately, it was only the upper half of the book. But only the first half has benefited the Taoist Nen a lot. He and the old ancestor Yuan, one of the old thrown big monsters in the wild world, naturally had a great dispute, and the latter moved the mountain. It is similar to the Nen Taoists' Hushan, the technique, and the height of the Taoism. The only way is to refining the mountain dragon vein, eat the mountain. The real name Zhu Wei, the head of Yuan, seems to have gotten a door from the side of the head and Yangji. Ancient magical powers, this makes both parties are also ascendant realm great monks. Zhu Fei long ago is that the Tao realm tends to consummation. The Wild Tao Pavilion is a slightly inferior peak. Only when the realm is completed can you have the capital and confidence. Pursue that illusory 14 realms. It's not that Taoist Nen had not moved his mind before, and wanted to ask Li Huai to beg the old blind man. As a result, Li Huai's 2 words dispelled Taoist Nen's thoughts. If I am willing to help you, but you really think I begged, most of my master is willing to give you the lower half of the ancient score. Take a step back, even if he can't save face on my side and gave you the lower half, do you really dare to practice? The Taoist Nen sighed, his son is really not stupid. Li Huai is hiding for his holiness, so it's hard to say it straight. Most of his old blind man, who is a master, speaks very well to him, Li Huai, but it's hard to say on your side, Lao Nin. In fact, this wild peach pavilion is only on the side of the old blind man, covering all the limelight, otherwise it will only be on the side of Yuan Yangzu, from Nangwangwing, to the fairy cloud, and then to the distant spectacles of Qin Zhao, Strict and Tian. Ni Zhilio, who would dare to regard this tender Taoist as an indifferent old man? As for Taoist Nen, before he became the watchdog of the 100,000 mountains, in that wild world, since he could fight a few solid fights with the old throne Yuanshou, wouldn't it be annoying? In the wild history, there was once a young, soaring realm with a reputation. The so-called Little Yuan Shou moved to the mountain. The fire was perfect. In just 1,000 years, he did not know that he had eaten hundreds of hills and the patriarch whole. So much so that the outside world is speculating about his chance of winning against Tao Ting, and some guesses are at least 50%. The result was that this inexperienced great monk was really blocked by Tao Pavilion during a trip. The two sides fought and fought for 1,000,000 miles away. After a hearty battle, only Tao Pavilion was left. One, suspended in the air, patted his stomach, burped, and only said, 50% full. Li Huai asked curiously, why did there have been so many golden core monks in the history of the Huangliang school, but there was not a single Yuaning? Is feng shui a bit weird? Taoist Nen said with a smile, it may be borrowed and repaid. Before on that ferry, as a well-deserved master, in the world of Hushan, the Taoist Nen found out the ins and outs of Lushan. It was an unusual geomantic treasure, so that the Taoists of Nin needed to figure out the calculations. I discovered an inconspicuous distraction in the Lushan area. There is a grotto dojo hidden between the cliffs. It just belongs to the place where Daobing Xuanji is reflected. There was an expert here who gets the Dao, and the lingering rhyme of Dao Qi. It lasts for a long time and is not eye-catching, but it is extremely concise and introverted, so it is extremely difficult to find. If you say that the mountains of Lushan are a prominent, official appearance, like a person wearing scarlet clothes, Anyone who knows a little bit of aura, you can see the depth, so this place belongs to the treasure gourd selected for deep planting, bred a longevity treasure, and that ground vein is an official goldfish bag that looks like a natural blindfold. Seeing that his son was confused, the Taoist nun explained patiently, this Huangliang sect, when the early luck was the most prosperous, it is said that a few worshippers and kaching were added. In a patriarch hall, there are 12 golden cores. At that time, Beipingzu was not a well-deserved first-rate fairy house. But there was a Taoist man who was proficient in the prosperity and decline of everything, and he accumulated some wealth for Lushan year after year. Over time, it became a treasure house is just a monk of the Huangliang school. A true monastic embryo has never appeared, so he cannot enter it because this treasure house requires a key and someone needs to open the door. Li Huai was amazed, the Patriarch's Hall is discussing matters, and there are 12 golden core immortals sitting at the same time, it's magnificent. Lu Hongwen is the most respectable and disciplined older monk, just like those old people in the rivers and lakes of the mountains, observing the old customs, and feels that it will be a dragon. It's unreasonable to be the head of a mountain. How lavish my family's ancestors are. In this Aquarius Island, if you stay in the dynasty under the mountain, you will be the kind of 4 generations and 3 masters. This kind of thing will be a big joke. Ashamed of the ancestors, what face is there to burn incense in the Patriarch Hall? After that, even if the head of the boss successfully formed a pill and became a well-known sword fairy in the southern part of Aquarius, the relationship with his uncle Lu Hongwen did not relax much. Why do you want me? Lu Hongwen, an elder from the mountain gate who is a teacher, bowed his head to admit his mistake with his nephew. Taoist Nen said helplessly, young master, how come brother Jindan is on your side? Is he still a worldly expert? Li Huai seemed to be even more helpless. Don't the mountains say, it's my generation to form a golden pill guest party. Since I have become a land immortal, how come I am not an expert? I have only met some great monks, and it's not me. Great monk, right? Taoist Nen immediately flattered and said, the ordinary heart of the sun is more than 10,000 miles higher than my Taoist heart. It is hard to find and hard to find. Li Huai continued to flip through the book and read about half of the book. I really couldn't read it anymore. I knew all the words. When I finished the sentence, I would often not understand it. I always felt that it was too mysterious and the truth was too great. Talking about the mysterious words of famous people, there is no margin, and there is no high-level sermon in the blank space. Li Huai sighed, it is not a piece of reading material, so I had to close the book, put it on the table, and stretched out his hand to wipe it. Ping, even if it is not a seed of reading that can shine, you still have to treat the books you start with. Taoist Nen has become accustomed to it. As long as his son reads the book, he must frown, earnestly, seriously. As for how much he can read, he. As for the copy of Mountain Refining, in his hand, Taoist Nen wanted to let his son go through it, but Li Huai hurriedly waved his hand and shook his head, saying, what am I doing with this? Do you understand? Even if the content of the text can be understood, with my qualifications, can I practice? What do you think, Lao Nin, deliberately watching me make a joke? But to be honest, Taoist Nen felt that even if he had won the second half of Mountain Refining, Taoist Nen did not have the slightest confidence in the 14th stage. So Yuan Shou, relying on that battle, how many hills did Fuyao and Tongye eat? So what? It's not still an ascension. Let's talk about this vast world, Wei Shi of Ia's How. Before the Taoist Nen, who walked this place under the name of Longshan Gong and Ming Kulu, he had guessed the clues. This first-rate genius monk who was once known as the aptitude crushed his peers, just above the word mountain, after suffering a great deal, it is very likely that 1 or even 2 times to the 14th level to no avail, Wei Shi will be so discouraged. Old Nen. Taoist Nen asked in doubt, young master, what's wrong? Li Huai said, I have an immature idea. Just listen to it. If it's wrong, if you feel naive, just hold back your laugh. Taoist Nen began to hold back his smile with a sullen face at this moment. Master, please say. Li Huai whispered, Lao Nen, your realm is so high. If you rely on moving to the top of the mountain, eating the mountains, and then digesting them one by one with the magical powers of your life, of course you can add Taoism and raise your realm bit by bit. But I always feel, away from your gods on the mountain, especially the avenue in the minds of the Taoist monks. There is a little distance away. The ancient book in your hand is not called Mountain Refining. After refining, is it possible to see places where there is no shortage of water but only mountains? Then you will occasionally spit out a few hills. Just like the book I just read, there is a sentence called 3,000 Accomplishments in Cultivation. It's the foundation of Taoism, the foundation of the law. It refers to the houses and residences where we live in the commonplace, not to mention the roots of the mountains. I think it makes sense. Wait a minute, let me turn over the book. Here, there is also this sentence, the person who wrote this book. Here is another sentence, into the water and fire, to live in the mountains in jade. Why should I talk to me about the cave and heaven? It seems that there is also this sentence, you can use other mountain stones to attack jade. Other mountains are the mountains outside the body, and this jade is the mountains in the heart. Whether it is the so-called heaven and earth person of Taoism, the parent of all things, or the so-called heaven and earth rebellion of poets, or the one that Confucianism, Buddhism and Taoism like to mention heaven and man are one, I think in the final analysis, what it is, it's hard to say, but I'm sure at least one thing, it's definitely not, similar to chess, it's not that there must be a winner or loser. The matter of cultivating the Taoism is definitely not an antagonistic relationship between you and me, and you add me and you will reduce it. Putting it on Lao Nen you, if you just blindly ask for mountains, hills and dragon veins from the world, and eat all the way, when will you be ahead? Can't eat all the 5 mountains and famous mountains in the world, right? If the whole world can be regarded as some kind of great monk who is similar to the spiritual path, he must face the endless fetching of monks in the world. If I don't give up, I'm afraid I'll find it annoying. Isn't that true? But I'm just a layman, and I'm just a few nonsense. At first the Taoist Nen looked relaxed, but after hearing Li Huai utter the word Tao, his heart was shocked. For no reason, he immediately asked the Taoist Nen to lift up his spirit, subconsciously straighten his waist, and sit up, and when Li Huai said the phrase, fundamentals of Taoism and law, Taoist Nen's expression changed. After the words Jishin Yulian passed, Taoist Nen was already overwhelmed, forget about it. When Li Huai spoke dry, he stopped talking, no matter whether Lao Nen sounded funny or not, Li Huai had already said that he was embarrassed. Incoherent, there are no rules about where to slide on the watermelon peel. Chen Pingan would be fine. The yellow-clothed old man suddenly recovered, reached out his hand and gently patted the threshold under the spanking, and muttered, I have heard about it, I have seen it. Li Huai looked down at the cover of the book. The writer was named Lu Mingyan. The Taoist Nen was full of vigor, and if there was divine light in his eyes, he raised his head and asked, Master, who wrote this book? Li Huai smiled and said, Lu Yen, it seems to be a Taoist priest. Taoist Nen asked in confusion, which word, words, or rocks? Li Huai said, the rock character on the top of the mountain. Taoist Nen stood up, shook his sleeves, faced Li Huai and the table, and worshipped 3 times, Li Huai, books, and Lu Yen. At the neighboring house, Chen Lingjun squatted on the steps, watching Guo Zhujiu walking and practicing boxing there. On the Huangliang school, there is no custom of eating New Year's Eve dinner in the mountains. Chen Lingjun and the Taoist Nen are all together, and the guest is just as he pleases, so let's just forget it, otherwise it will only make the Huangliang school feel embarrassed. Chen Lingjun asked, Guo Zhujiu, you are Jian Xiu, why do you walk here every day to practice boxing? Guozhuzhou jumped up high, swept his legs roundly, and settled down, and said, diligence can make up for one's clumsiness. Chen Lingjun rolled his eyes. Am I asking you about this? Guozhuzhou said suddenly, that person named Huang Tsong is really an emperor. That Huang Tsong was the first emperor Guozhuzhou saw after he came to Howran world. Chen Lingjun stood up with his hands on his hips, and said proudly, you said my Huang Tsong brother, that must be the emperor of a country, and there is no arrogance, right? It is that the amount of alcohol is poor, and the rest can't be picked out. There is something wrong. Speaking of this, Chen Lingjun said bitterly, I have already let go, Guozhuzhou. Turn around to the master, can you help me say something nice? Guozhuzhou said, it is necessary. Instead, Chen Lingjun was stunned. Oh. Are you really willing to help? Guozhuzhou doubted, I saw master. I have a big basket of things to say, just a few good things to help you. It's just a small dustpan inside the big basket. Is there anything I want or not? Chen Lingjun nodded as fast as a chicken pecking at rice. His heart was warm and he almost burst into tears on the spot. Tenwei Shanjun who don't talk about justice and justice are not as good as a chivalrous-hearted Guozhuzhou. Guozhuzhou suddenly stopped walking, look for Li Huai. Chen Lingjun stood up and asked casually, why are you going? Guozhuzhou has always wanted to come out as soon as he came out. With a little tiptoe, he jumped up to the wall and said, look for Li Huai and let him use his life's magical powers, the master sister said. It is very effective and has been tried. Chen Lingjun heard it loudly for a while and knew what Guozhuzhou was talking about. It meant that Li Huai painted ghost symbols on the ground and wrote Chen Pingan's name again and again, and he could really see his master. Chen Lingjun looked up at the man who was already standing on the wall. The guy above said, Li Huai talks nonsense, and the money is rumored to be rumored, do you really believe it? Guozhuzhou, who was like a bird, walked away, and said, believe it, you will lose money. Chen Lingjun thought about it, it seems right. Immediately shouted, wait for me. It's just that Guozhuzhou's habit of not going through the door and like going over the wall is really hard to teach people a word. Next time I see her master, my master, I must say something secretly. At the gate of the mountain, a talisman paper kite was used to send a letter to Lushan Zhu Shirtang. The paper kite flapped its wings, drawing a golden stream of fireflies in the air, and went straight to the Zhu mountain. It is not only a letter, but also a good news. The two young monks temporarily serving as concierges, one male and one female, are both in the cave mansion realm, but they are both the hope of the future of the Huangliang school. Taking this opportunity, it is a kind of little red dust experience at the foot of the mountain. As for the real janitor who was more sophisticated, he led a group of visitors up the mountain not long ago, but he has not yet descended. The two of them flushed, their eyes widened, and they looked like they would lose money after a short glance, and they looked at the blue shirt hard. If this happened to a green shirt guest outside the mountain, would really not recognize it. Chen Ping'an had to smile and nod in greetings with them, the man grinned, and the woman pursed his lips. He didn't think about how to speak properly, and he still had no words. Divine God sect, as the bullheader on the Aquarius mountain, of course, to the monks of Izhou, it is like a thunderous existence. It's just that, autumn view, I have never heard of it. And the blessed land of the Cloud Cave in Tonggishao is also very famous, it is the private land of the respected sect Master Jiang of Yuguizang. This immortal master and I can serve as the guest Qing of the blessed land of the Cloud Grottos, and he has joined forces with Chen Yingguan. He must be a strange person with extremely high Taoism. Only the sister named Xin Tong, who claimed to be from Mount Xiandu in Tonggishao, had no clue. Delivery gold is like iron, and time comes like iron. This Huangliang Pai has a good time, and it is considered that iron is hard by itself. For at least 300 to 500 years, you can really sit back and relax. Lu Qin lifted his sleeves with both hands, looked up at the Lushan Patriarch Hall, and smiled with a heartfelt smile. I heard that the contemporary head of the Huangliang school is still a sword fairy. The name Gao headed is good, really good. When Pang Dao returns to Qingming, one day he has a cultivator embryo, and he plans to accept it as a direct descendant. He will definitely give him a Dao name, called Worry-Free. Tell him, or her, in the future, if you are successful in cultivating the Tao and can travel far to the vast world, you must come to the Huangliang sect as a guest and say a few words of thanks to the sword immortal named Gao Jin. Chen Pingan squinted at Lu Xin. Lu Chen learned everything, squinting at Qing Tong. Qing Tong feels weak, I can't compare to the two of you, but am not a fool. Of course, Qing Tong also heard what Lu Chen meant. After Lu Chen returned to the Qingming world, he tried his luck and looked at his fate. In the future, the newly acquired direct disciple will have a worry-free, Taoist trainer in the future. Even if the road is very smooth, the situation is as good as a broken bamboo, but if this person wants to travel far across the world, then at least it must be a great monk of Ascension realm, and then come to this mountain, see Gao Jin with his own eyes, and thank him personally, which means that Huangliang sect's Gao Jin must wait for this day. As for a monk, it would take at least 1,000 years, even 2,000 to 3,000 years, to become an ascendant. Even if this person is a descendant of Bai Yujing's 3 sects, he has good roots and is willing to be a master Lu Qin. He preached the Tao Fa, and then piled up chances and treasures on him. 1,000 years, no matter how it should be 1,000 years later. As for the Taoist pure son, didn't he also say, I have never taken the head of a man with a flying sword in the 800 autumn years since I got the Tao? Lu Yan's so-called achieving Tao refers to the formation of alchemy by himself, and the 800 years of cold and heat that has never sacrificed the flying sword refers to the years of practice before the ascension of the Tao. In addition, like Ningyao, the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the savage world is a rare example after all. From this, it can be seen that the years of Jian Xiu's cultivation will not be short. Presumably, the current leader of the Huangliang school, who is extremely bumpy, will have some good luck in the future. Lu Qin smiled and said, how about Dong Sanzhen and the others, have you forgotten them? And the hidden officer in front of you, do you dare to ignore it? The young fellow was anxious. Did Lu Zhangjiao imply that besides this official Qin Yin, there is also Mr. Jing who is far away in the sky? Lu Qin rolled his eyes. My fellow Taoists, would you be too smart? Chen Pingan reminded, when you get to the mountain later, don't make troubles with moths. Lu Qin smiled and said, whenever you go out, you will always be kind to others. Chen Pingan laughed off. Lu Qin asked, do you think that the pillow will be a great excitement? Call all the members of the Patriarch Hall, and rush to the foot of the mountain to pick you up. Ni Yuanpin smiled and said, in other words, the Huangliang sect is also a fairy house that has seen the world, and it is not in the middle of the city. It is like the county grandfather has entered the country and village, and he has to beat the gongs and drums to appear solemn and polite. Lu Qin suddenly snorted and rubbed his chin, this is all right. It really means that there is no difference between the Wei and the Wei. Except for Ni Yuanpin in the Yupu realm, they were still unaware. The others Chen Pingan and Qing Tong also noticed the mysterious Taoism ripples in the mountains. Chen Pingan asked in his heart, did Tao Ting find a way? Lu Qin nodded, however, it's almost meaningless from the realm of speaking under the Enlightenment. At present, this touting Taoist fellow can only say that he has found a possibility, no longer need to be desperate, eat and wait for death. Qing Tong said softly, Chen Pingan, since the Taoist Pure Yang spoke in person before, let you find the Tao sword art that points directly at the golden core. We passed by just now, why not take a look? Lu Xinren couldn't help but feel like, you can rest assured that fellow Taoists don't want to grab this chance with the hidden officer. Yo, the female Congress is not in the middle of staying, so you turned your elbow to the hermit Sama so quickly? That's right, they are all kaching from Shindu Mountain. Chen Pingan said, I'm already watching it. Above Lushan, in a very elegant and quiet small courtyard pavilion, the head of the house is playing chess with a young man who looks like a scribe. The person who played with the pillow was Huang Tsong, the emperor of Mengliang Kingdom. Behind him stood a woman in a palace costume with strong water transport and a burly old man with a deep moral spirit. The prince of a country, on the Lunar New Year's Day, did not stay in the palace of the capital, as if it was the first time in the history of Huangliang Kingdom. Huang Tsong nodded. He wanted to speak, but he swallowed his stomach again when the words came to his lips, twisted his head again, and laughed and joked. Master Gao, now you Huangliang faction can finally be lavish, me alone, as well as Nalan Water God, Lord Maishan, and our 3 congratulatory gifts. How can they be regarded as a large sum of money, let alone Yunxia Mountain? I will all envy, very envious. The water named Nalan said with a smile on her face, before I climbed the mountain, I persuaded your majesty. It's better to put the gift I prepared with Jun Maishan into the royal treasury together. Anyway, the head of the house won't account for it. What's more, the goddess of water was dressed in blue, with colored threads wrapped around her arms, and a small talisman hanging diagonally with green clouds. Just by looking at her costume, she knew that she was an admirer of Su Zi. He laughed loudly and said, this time I did not earn less. The most important thing is to finally get Yunxiashan to congratulate him. It is not easy. Broad people live and get rich, and get richer. The poor spend money on their lives, and become poorer and poorer. Don't treat me, face is not good, treat me, swollen face to fill up the fat man. The guests go away after eating, turning around quietly hungry. The same goes for the mountains. In the early years, with the neighbors who were a few steps away on the Yunxia Mountain, I knew that there was suffering, a small amount of money, spending money like water. The key is the kind of red envelope that is destined to go and never return. Just talk about the green juniper peak Kai Jinjian, the golden pill, the opening ceremony, and then become the Yuaning. How many gifts will the Huangliang sect send out? You can't make your shots too shabby, right? In addition, Yunxia Mountain's Taoist geniuses have been one after another. The Taoist couples on the mountain have become married, and XX has entered the Dongfu realm and became a middle 5 god, and some old teachers of the Yunxia Mountain Zushitang who are familiar with the Huangliang school have received new ones. A direct disciple. In contrast, my own Huangliang Pai, that is, the situation has improved over the past few decades. Before that, it was really a bleak time for a dumb-to-eat Coptis. For the opening ceremony this time, the Huangliang faction's original plan was of course to be held in a big way, so it was only for a guarantee. Just because of that unexpected joy, it is more than a capital preservation, it is simply a profit. The Huangliang faction had no idea whether it was possible to invite monk Luopashan, and with the mentality of trying it out, send a polite invitation. Although the young hermit failed to come to congratulate him personally, Zhu Lian, as the chief steward, wrote a letter in the name of the Patriarch of Ji Sifeng, explaining why his mountain lord could not participate in the celebration. If it is Chen Shanju who is unwilling to come, there is no need to bother at all, just put the invitation letter of the Huangliang faction aside. Moreover, according to my uncle, Chen Shanju, who is young, treats people sincerely, is kind and honest, and will never make a standoff with us on this kind of thing. No one at Master Lu Shan's think too much. It is that the eye sockets are shallow, and the gentleman's belly is saved with the heart of a villain. In the end, on the side of Luopa Mountain, 2 esteemed guests came to congratulate the climbers, Brother Yuaning and Chen Lingjun. Jin Dan Dixian, Guizhuzhou. I heard that the former was the first genealogical monk who walked into the Luopa mountain, so he didn't need to call any mountain lord, he just called the master. The latter is now the young disciple of Qin Shanju, so it can be regarded as half a closed disciple for the time being. Since she is the descendant of a young hermit, what if she is a sword repairman again? The Huangliang faction didn't even dare to publicize the matter, because they were afraid that they would do things improperly, which would make Luopa feel that they misunderstood that they wanted it, and that would turn a good thing into a bad thing. But there are no impervious walls in the world. When I heard that there were 2 monks with not low status on the side of Luopa mountain, they had already stayed at the Lushan mansion. Once they passed on, it was known to all passers-by, and they took the initiative. The guests who asked for the ceremony, some of them who hadn't been invited before, all came, and the number of people who attended the ceremony at least doubled. Even on Yunxia mountain, a master and 2 old peak masters came. His Majesty, the Emperor of Mengliang Kingdom, even climbed the mountain himself. Meishanjun, one of the 5 sacred mountains in a country, and the first of water, are here, don't you have to protect him? The Huangliang faction is in charge of the old monks who are greeted and sent off. Every day, he complains endlessly while his eyes are full of smiles. For many years, the Huangliang school has never been so beautiful. Huang Tsong got up before he talked again and stopped. Sit back, still just ignore it, look low, staring at the chessboard, in fact, sit back and know why the emperor came to the mountain, the so-called hiding leisure, or watching a ceremony, of course are relatively lame excuses. The real idea is to see if there is a chance, and forge an incense affair with Luopa mountain, and do not expect the young hermits to set foot in the country of dreams. Huang Tsong didn't expect himself to be a guest at the Luopa mountain and not eat a closed door. He only asked the Luopashan genealogical monks such as Chen Lingjun and Guozhujiu to serve as an offering to Mengliang country, as well as Keqing. It's just that this kind of thing can't be the Lord, and the emperor doesn't speak up, so he just pretends to be stupid and will never take the initiative to take the initiative. This young emperor who has enthroned in troubled times is still very high-spirited. Otherwise, if he is only asking for an offering and a guest for the Mengliang country, the big deal is to visit Yunxia mountain in person and find an old ferry for the Mengliang country. The chief worship is actually not a difficult task. The surrounding countries of Mengliang Kingdom all know that this young emperor was wearing a dragon robe when he got off his horse back then. Because when Huang Tsong was still a prince, he took the initiative to lead his army to the battlefield of Dali, accompanying capital, and even the one who was actually lying in the dead and then found out. In that battle, Mengliangguo only talked about the Ministry of War, except for the old people, the young and strong officials, almost all changed. Therefore, Huangliang State in Ao Pingzhou was the first to rehabilitate the country after the end of the war and remove the status of the vassal. There are even many natives of the Mengliang State, and they are still in the Lubiaman and Xiajiaking Yamen of Dallas companion capital. Agency appointment. Seeing that High Pillow did not answer, Huang Tsong laughed at himself. There was no discomfort on his face and in his heart. Every family had difficult to recite sutras, so don't let Gao Zhangmen and Huangliang faction embarrass them. How could there be less formal doorways on the mountain than the officialdom under the mountain? Turn around and find the master Chen Xian who claimed to be nicknamed Xiao Bai Tiao in Yujiang Waves, Little Dragon King on the Fallen Mountain, and have a drink at the bar. But it is estimated that it was really just a drink. Last time Huang Tsong took the initiative to pay a visit with a cheeky face, this Tsingyi childlike Yuaning Water Jiao old fairy, talkative, approachable, and especially appetite at the wine table, soon became brothers and brothers with himself. It's just that when it comes to serving as an offering to the Mengliang Kingdom, the other party appears extremely determined. He can't make a decisive statement. It's impossible, and his master is not on the mountain. He can't do such a major event. Of course Huang Tsong was somewhat disappointed, but it was similar to the situation in the pavilion at this time with the pillows. The twisted melon is not sweet and does not embarrass others. And the boy in Tsing Yi, who had the same surname as the young hermit, had drunk wine and kept sending himself out, with a guilty expression on his face that was not quite like the sincere words that the monks on the mountain would say, "Brother Huang, sorry, it's really not going to happen. If we got to know each other sooner, if I don't say anything else, it'll just be what you say." It's not too big for the official hat of the sky, and the official hat for the small one is not too small. They are all friends. It's just a trivial matter for you, Brother Huang. But now, on our side of Luopa Mountain, they are all equivalent to the closure of the mountain. It is not a joke. After all, this is something my master said in person. You are not familiar with our Luopa Mountain. You may not know. I was the first to go up the mountain, and it was the least that I did not help the master at all. If I cause trouble to the master again, I will have troubles, I will lose face, and I will not be able to raise my head. Although Huang Tsong was wondering at the time why a dignified monk Yuaning would be the most unhelpful monk on that Luopa mountain. Even the hilltop of the young hermit should not be the case. It was just that Huang Tsong was willing to believe it when he looked at the sad expression of the boy in Tsing Yi. And in the end, the boy in Tsing Yi, who seemed to remember something, suddenly laughed and patted his chest to make sure that next time I saw the master, I could help explain this situation. As long as the master is willing to nod his head, you don't dislike Brother Huang. This worship, I will be it. Don't worry, Brother Huang, I've always been shameless on the master's side. As long as the master doesn't object, I can also help bring in a good friend named me, at least as a guest of the Mengliang country, it's not a problem. Of course Huang Tsong would not refuse this kindness. The other party may be some kind words after sobering up, or it may not be. After Huang Tsong walked out for a while, he looked back again, and the boy in Tsing Yi was still standing there, grinning, waving goodbye to himself, and finally flicking his two sleeves and walking inside the door. In fact, in the depths of the emperor's heart, on the side of Luopa Mountain, Huang Tsong wants to meet the person most, except for the young hermit who is definitely ranked first, followed by a female master. As long as he can see them, Huang Tsong cannot talk about worshipping or visiting the Qing at all. Chen Ping did not cheat Qing Tong. In fact, Lu Chenxin God, who had recreated a dreamland, was in that grotto at this moment. Chen Pingan, who was wearing a green shirt, stood on the edge of the rock wall with Master Lu, who was wearing a lotus crown. Lu Chen could touch the top of the grotto as soon as he raised his hand. In the land of the abbot, the Taoist pure sun who made the golden pill at the beginning did not seem to have left any traces, only an old futon, which was woven from the simplest grass. Lu Chen walked around the futon, keeping one hand against the wall, and then stopped and said, "Pan Dao can't see how strange this futon is." Chen Pingan has been standing in place with his arms folded, and asked, "Since Lu Zhu has not imposed any restrictions on landscapes, you said that for so many years, no one in the vicinity of woodsmen and herb gatherers has entered this place." Lu Chen shook his head and said, "Probably not." Chen Pingan turned around and leaned against the stone wall. "That kid?" Lu Chen sat down on the futon, cross-legged, palms facing up, pinching with two fingers, and smiling. "I just gave the child away to go. I won't be superfluous. Qi Zhen is the most careful in doing things. This child is placed on the Kiwagwan side, and will neither pull out the seedlings to encourage growth, nor violent things. By the way, the child's name is Yilang, the arrogant Yilang Lang." Chen Pingan wondered, that kid really has the qualifications to practice. Lu Chen shook his head and said, "Strictly speaking, it is not suitable to practice. Even if you smash your head at the gate of the Huangliang school, you will not be able to go up to the mountain or become a god. But this child has wisdom roots, and the aptitude for cultivation is visible to the naked eye. Things are said to be useful, and useless is useless. For example, whether it is in the Qingming world or the vast world, many unknown monks in the temples are not necessarily better than those in terms of the difficulty of the Dharma. There is a Buddhist monk with the status of a monk in the upper 5 realms. But if he can't practice, he can't practice. Fortunately, it doesn't delay their practice of Buddhism. Chen Pingan asked, "That kid, can you catch the opportunity you gave?" Lu Qin smiled and nodded. "Then you haven't seen his talisman on the ground. It's not tacky. It's a pity that it's just a god, but it's just aloft in the sky. So if you haven't met you and me, his live situation, the situation is similar to the monks I mentioned." Chen Pingan turned his head and looked at Lu Qin sitting on the futon meditating, and said solemnly, "The Jianghu romance and Jiguai novels have so many bridges. One is being chased by an enemy, falling off a cliff, this place is a bit like it, and then inadvertently meet the withered bones of the expert or the remains of the immortal. If you don't say anything, knock a few heads first, maybe you can trigger some kind of agency restriction, and get a martial arts secret book that can be invincible in the world. You might as well give it a try. Anyway, here is the 2 of us, not ashamed." Lu Qin nodded as if pounding garlic. Yes, that boy Jiang Yunqing likes to read these miscellaneous books, and he is watching the door in the Dakshuan mountain, and he will be the city lord as usual. Chen Pingan has a deep memory of that little Taoist boy. He reads books every time he sees him, and asks, is he become the city lord of Shinchao City or Verdant City? Lu Qin smiled and said, "It's the city lord of the Verdant City, who is an exceptional promotion, and is not the lord of the Baiyujing City, who is not a monk in the ascended realm. It is rare in history." Of course it is because of Lu Chen's meager efforts, but at the same time, Jiang Yunqing needs to face a life and death catastrophe. That is a real test. If he survives, he will be the righteous Verdant City Lord, rather than being treated. It's just a janitor who has the title of City Lord. If it doesn't happen, let's talk about it in the next life. Because when Lu Chen returned to Baiyujing from Tian Weishan, he detained a mustard seed-sized Wawa Weishan demon, and then threw it into Jiang Yunsheng's Dao heart in front of his senior brother Yudo. Mastering the stick, but aiming for the yard. Lu Chen smiled and said, "Is it possible to remove another dream? Chen Ping's placement is deaf." Lu Chen sighed, because in that LV Gong temple site, a dream has just evolved. At the moment, Lu Xing, the girl Peony Charm, the mountain and the wild cultivators, the 2 great immortals, still talking to themselves over there. Chen Pingan seemed to have never appeared before, and that Lu Xing did not see through the identity of the girl Peony, and continued to drink at the same table with Lu Xing. The 2 sides in the courtyard who were no longer fighting were still waiting to hear. Chen Pingan said, "It won't last long anyway, it will dissipate on its own. It's like a stroke dipped in thick ink and made in cursive script at one go. No matter how many words there are, the ink on the paper will always become paler." Lu Chen stopped struggling with such trivial matters, and sighed for no reason. Is there a hermit in the world? Chen Pingan didn't even think of talking. Seeing that Lu Chen showed no signs of getting up, he simply sat on the edge of the grotto, hanging his feet outside the cliff, quietly looking into the distance. "Chen Pingan, you said that if the era of the end of the Dharma really comes, will the people at that time entangle and quarrel a question, whether there are people in the world who are cultivating the Tao?" Lu Chen asked and replied, "The big question. It seems that as long as there is one, it will do. We seem to be accustomed to thunder and rain, sweating in the sun, birth, old age, sickness and death under the mountain, and withered vegetation between heaven and earth. Chen Pingan, do you think we are acquiesced to be a matter of heaven and earth justice? This is collectively called the context of causality. Who can be responsible for this context? If life is a debt and debt repayment, then as the guarantor of the intermediary, who is it and what kind of existence is it? I once asked this question. The senior brother answered the wrong question, and told me that it was just a small question. I just asked, in the eyes of senior brother, what is the real big problem? Senior brother smiled and replied, saying that if the whole world is regarded as one, then can my generation of cultivators have the magical powers to increase or decrease this seemingly unchanging 1 by 1 cent? Text. It still doesn't seem to be counted. Time is long. It seems even less than enough. Chen Ping'an, what do you think? Chen Ping'an finally spoke. I don't think anything, I just think that dreams can barely be counted as one kind, because in your opinion, the imaginer, one of the 12 high gods, may not really be at the end of the road, otherwise it is one of the 6 highest, not the 5 highest. Lu Chen sighed, I am so sad. Chen Ping'an asked, you seem to be afraid of the Buddha. Back then, I thought I had completely broken the text barrier, so I took a trip to the Western Buddhist country. Lu Chen didn't hide anything, the Buddha used to interpret my dreams for me. In that realm of dream interpretation, the Buddha completely blurred the boundaries between Sumra mustard and eternal moment. I couldn't even calculate that place. The years in the dreamland, how long have passed? Tens of millions of years. Hundreds of millions of years. All kinds of births, all kinds of deaths, countless changes of identities, countless postures, unpredictable, true and false. Chen Ping'an smiled and said, there is immortal skill close to one's body, which is called daring. After learning the immortal method, you are not afraid to travel all over the world. It sounds familiar, the first sentence is the wording in the previous dream, and the latter sentence seems to be the mantra of Sun Dao Chang. Lu Chen stood up, bent over again, and was about to take the unrecognizable futon to the sheep. Chen Ping'an said, don't take it, just stay where it is. Lu Chen looked sad, so he had to gently put the futon back on the spot, pretending to pat the dust, suddenly became a little curious, and asked, the story in your dreamland, the content of the poor way, where has it developed? Chen Ping'an said, I lost my realm inexplicably. I was slapped and slapped while being scolded by the girl, and my face was swollen. I was still saying that poverty is really by you jingless master teacher, yelling that the sun and the moon can be learned from heaven and earth. Conscience. Lu Chen said distressedly, so miserable? Chen Ping'an smiled and said, otherwise you think. Lu Chen rubbed his hands and said, since the poor Tao has been scolded, is there a hug? Even if you don't have a hug, you always touch the girl's face and little hands. Chen Ping'an said, you slapped your face, do you count you touching the girl's hand with your face? Lu Chen said, hey, this crooked reason, I like it poorly. Chen Ping'an started to swallow clouds and fog when he drew out a stick of dry smoke and became familiar with the road. After a great war, for Haranjojo, it seemed like a test of people's minds. Just talking about the mountains and rivers of the Aquarius Island is a change of customs and customs, like a reborn person. Lu Chen came to Chen Ping'an and sat down, and asked casually, before you went to Qingming World, except for the tour with Lu Jinglong, you also practiced and then practiced. Have you continued to practice? Chen Ping'an shook his head and said, of course not. After the tour, I will be a teacher in Huang Tingguo's village school. I will also write a mountain and water travel note for Xiaomi Li. Now Chen Ping'an is compiling a landscape travel note by himself, writing about a young ranger who walks across the rivers and lakes. In that dumb lake, he met a hidden big water monster and actively invited the other party to travel together, and soon fought side by side. To meet the enemy's ancestor of Huangsha who was in trouble together, the two sides battled wits and courage, surrounded by dangers, and finally won. Afterwards, the dumb lake monster realized that the ranger was the young mountain owner who had sleepwalked on the mountain. It's called fate, so I made suggestions for the ranger all the way, as the think tank and military advisor, wading through the mountains and rivers together, invincible. The monsters are afraid, especially when they often fight poems with people, and they have never failed. Chen Ping'an said for no reason, "It's hard for you to talk to Xiao Mo, the donkey is a vassal of the horse, but the word household is added." Lu Qin shook his sleeves and said with a hippie smile, "Isn't my heart open and the road narrow? I really fell in love with Xiao Mo, after knowing that the donkey is the vassal of the horse." There is another sentence that no one can take seriously, but Lu Xin can't ignore it. Spiders are the enemy of butterflies. The 7 things of Lu Chen's heart are the wooden chicken, the chrysanthemum tree, the mole, the kuenping, the cardinal, the snail, and the butterfly. Lu Chen turned his head and glanced at Chen Pingan. Inside the wooden door of Chen Pingan's home, there is a peach tree. "I just don't know whether Taoye can see peach blossoms after today, and it's another new year." Chen Pingan then casually chatted about his future monastic career. "When the place of happiness comes, in the middle of winter, when the snow is heavy, take a small boat, boil wine on the stove, and enjoy the snow in the middle of the lake. In heavy rain, wearing a hat, on the banks of the river, watch a big water change as a dragon and a snake. One day when martial arts broke through, I would have an appointment with Chao Ci on the sea. I heard that the plum blossoms in Jiui Mountain this year are particularly moving, so I went to see it." Lu Qin smiled and said, "I'm just observing, I have to be fascinated." Sword of Coming Chapter 940. When Lu Shan Zhu Shitang got the paper kite letter, Fei Jin immediately sent the letter to the pavilion. The sword light flashed, his pillow frowned slightly, his fingers were brought together, and he caught the flying sword. After reading the secret message, he was shocked, stunned, and rejoiced. After that, his face was filled with an uncontrollable smile. Huang Tsong didn't ask anything. This time it was the turn to sit back and hesitate, and smiled. "Your Majesty waits for a while, can't wait for a certain news, anyway, Your Majesty has nothing to lose. If you wait, it will be a return from our Huangliang faction." Coming out of the pavilion, he walked away directly with Yu Jin. In the end, Gao Zhen only shouted 2 old monks of the Huangliang sect. They fell together near the gate of the mountain. They walked down the steps, dozens of steps, and quickly walked past the archway of the mountain gate. The voice opened his mouth and said, "The Huangliang faction sits back and pays respects to Lord Qin Shan." Chen Pingan clasped his fists and replied with courtesy, "Luopashan Chen Pingan has met the head of Gao." After a polite greeting, 2 groups of host and guest boarded Lu Shan together. "Sit back, of course, will not neglect the other 3 distinguished guests brought by Qin Shanju." The cultivators who were able to visit the mountains with this young hermit would think with their knees, knowing that their identities are good and their Taoism is high. After that, Gao Zhen and Chen Pingan walked side by side, and the other 2 Huangliang sect elder monks were responsible for walking behind with the 3. For the genealogy monks in the martial arts sect, this kind of entertainment is a trivial matter of practice makes perfect. It will never be cold. However, it seems that they are all the young Taoist priests from Kuaguan, who have been looking around, asking questions, and there is no idleness in their mouths. It is strange that they will be cold. It's just those questions, which are quite unpopular. For example, the Taoist priest wearing a fishtail crown would ask the ratio of the fairy on the mountain to the man practicing qi, but it should not be too yang and in decay. Chen Pingan explained, "Gao sect, this mountaineering visit is not within the established route of the previous trip. In short, it is a relatively accidental thing. And I can only stay in the mountains for a while, and I will need it soon. Go down the mountain and continue on the road." He smiled and said, "As long as Lord Qin Shan can come and sit for a while, it's fortunate." Chen Pingan asked with a smile, "Is Master Lu Xian now on the mountain?" Pillow shook his head and said, "Uncle Lu and Uncle Song will come back a few days later." On the Yidifeng side, Lu Hongwen divided up from the Huangliang school. In addition to taking away a group of direct disciples, there was only one younger brother named Song who was willing to walk with Lu Hongwen, even the child of Uncle Lu, who was Lu Runyan. Neither of his parents moved to Yidefeng, but chose to stay in Lushan to practice. One can imagine the popularity of Lu Hongwen in the Huangliang school in his early years. It's not that Uncle Liu's character is bad, it's just that bad temper, which really makes people unbearable. Whenever the patriarch's church is in discussion, Uncle Lu will always turn over the old yellow calendar and talk about the old tunes. Let's take a look at Lushan, the dozens of hills where the opening ceremony was held in the past. I really don't know how the spirits of the ancestors above will feel. Chen Pingan laughed softly. Master Lu has a long history of antiquity. Perhaps in certain things, certain outspoken words will inevitably make it difficult for you to accept when going up the mountain. The more you can't talk about right or wrong, the more it's not clear. Of course, I'm just an outsider. I'm here to say a few words about my personal perception of standing and talking. But I believe that the future monks of the Huangliang school, especially the younger generation, will look back at the disputes and seriousness of the past. Then it will be regarded as a precious past experience. He nodded and nodded. If you have the intention to look back, the old people are not taboo, the young people are not repulsive, and can accommodate many different people. If we say different things, it proves that our Huangliang school is true. Is different from before. Chen Pingan said, that's the truth. Confidently said, it's hard to come by, so cherish it. Chen Pingan smiled and nodded. Qintong always feels that there are a few differences, why are you two still talking about the truth? Lu Qin hugged the back of his head with both hands, and laughed in his heart. You fellow Taoists, don't you understand? This is called telling a lie to a real person. You don't need to be polite with heroes. It is also a golden alchemist, is he a sword repairer, and his perception of the sword spirit Great Wall is different. With a slightly guilty look on the pillow, he used his heartfelt words and changed his name. I am not afraid of the jokes of the hermit, even if I put aside my identity as the head. I want to go to the Great Wall of Jianqi to pass the sword to kill the demon. At most it is a thought in my heart. Thinking, I would never dare to go down the mountain for a long journey, cross the hanging mountain, pass through the private houses of the sword immortal, and then climb the top of the city. It is really just hiding on the mountain and I can only think about it. So this time the Huangliang faction and I sit up together. We were cheeky before and dare to invite the hermit to attend the ceremony. This is really offensive. I sit back and relax as a swordsman, and it is even more embarrassing. Chen Pingan shook his head and said, scholars stand up as holy and sages, and those who shed their hearts to become Buddhas and ancestors. The way to go is the upper level, only the middle. Always first-class minds can have second-class people and third-class things. You and I are no exceptions. No need to be too guilty for the high head. Chen Pingan turned his head and smiled. Where is the Great Wall of Sword Qi in life? There is an injustice of sword cultivation. I think it is the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Sit back, what do you think? Pillow nodded and said, I think so. Although he was called by his first name, Gao Xing did not feel any discomfort. Because I heard that in the land where sword repair is like a cloud, it has been custom and always like this since ancient times. It is rarely the way to call others with the surname affixed to the sword immortal. Your Majesty Hermit, among the guests on the mountain, there is also our Emperor of Mengliang Kingdom. Your Majesty has admired Qin Shanju for a long time. If Qin Shanju finds it inappropriate to see him, I will not notify him at all. Chen Pingan said, to see Huang Tsong, even if it's not a coincidence today, I will visit the emperor in the future. Sit back and feel surprised. Because the young hermit directly reported the name, it was obvious that he had already heard of the young emperor of Mengliang Kingdom. There was a strange feeling in Qing Tong's heart, and he followed Chen Pingan to meet so many landscape gods, plus this Huangliang school. Carefully review all the words, expressions, eyes, and actions of Chin Pingon and others. If there is a summary, it would be like a straight line. There are occasional ups and downs, such as mentioning his disciple Pei Qian with Yao Hihibo, chatting about his husband with Sui Shan, and chatting about the Great Wall of Sword Qi, pure sword repair. At the gate of the mountain, the man secretly tore off a page of paper and carefully carried it into his arms. The nun, who grew up with a childhood sweetheart, also pretended not to see it. It's just the old monk who is the real concierge of the Huangliang faction, hurriedly rushing from a peak to the wind, opened the book and turned over, stretched out his hand, and said with a smile, "Get it, hurry up." The man monk said pitifully, "Uncle Do. It's just a page with a few words on it. What to care about with me?" The old monk took the book in his hand and stared, "These pages, but you have to invite them to the secret library archives room. You must keep the important items in the secret library. You kid also dare to keep them private. Believe it or not, Fan Zhonglu will follow up afterwards. Get up and find that you have missed this page, and you will directly record your big mistake at the Patriarch Hall. How old is it? There is no seriousness, I am not sensible." The young man had to take out the piece of paper again from his arms, and the old monk put it in his sleeve in a thunderous manner, and then reminded the two younger generations that Qin Shanju came to Lushan, so please don't disclose it for the time being. After the sentence, the old monk hurriedly went to discuss the matter with Fan Zhonglu. "Just a few pieces of paper, Fan Zhonglu. As long as you are willing to open your eyes and close your eyes, I will be responsible for the next drink." Gao Zhen led Chen Pingon to the gate of a house in Lushan, and then talked to the young hermit about Huang Tsong's residence, and then took the other two Huangliang patriarchs to leave. It was a surprise if I didn't plan to inform the young emperor in advance. What's more, I didn't contribute any more, and this kind of favor that seemed to be given in vain was not for nothing. In the courtyard, Li Huai was talking to Guo Zhujiu, repeatedly explaining that he had invited Chen Pingon a few times before. He had made mistakes. There was no magical powers in his own life. Pei Qian exaggerated it, but at the door, a group of people appeared next to him. Guo Zhujiu was full of surprise and gave Li Huai a thumbs up. Guo Zhujiu rushed to the blue shirt, smiling brightly and said, "Master." Chen Pingon smiled and nodded, "I will come to see you by chance, and I will return to Tongyi's house soon." Guo Zhujiu asked, "How fast?" Chen Pingon thought for a while and said, "At least 2/4 of an hour in Lushan." It's not that the master doesn't want to stay long, but that there are still important things waiting to be dealt with in Tongyi's house. Guo Zhujiu palmed his hand with a boxing, "What question?" Chen Pingon explained to Guo Zhujiu the three people around him, Ni Fuzi from the blessed land of the Tongyi's Hao Cloud Grottos. As for the identity of the Xianda mountain guest Qing, compiled by Qingtong at the mountain gate, I am the lord of the supreme sect. Did not agree. Li Huai was a little unsure, and asked tentatively, "Dao Master Lu. If you read it right, it's the one who set up a fortune-telling stall in your hometown. It's quite effective." Chen Lingjun swallowed and moved little by little, thinking silently that I can't see me, hiding behind Wuzhujiu. Lu Chen looked at this young man in a Confucian shirt, that was also quite speechless. In those days, wore open pants and wandered around. The Oriole, which Lu Xun used to measure the amount of cultural luck, was almost, really just a little too close, to be picked up by this little bunny. The problem is that Li Huai is indeed a mere mortal with naked eyes. Li Huai smiled and said, "Dao Master Lu, after so many years, he is still very young, I guess, Dao Chang Lu must be a cultivator." Lu Chen smiled stiffly, "It's easy to talk. I still don't know anything, anyway this kid doesn't seem to know anything." Your heartfelt voice fell in the ears of the poor, like thunder. Chen Lingjun tremblingly raised his hand, wiped the sweat on his face indiscriminately, tried his best to open his voice, and said sternly, "Master Lu, there must be a limit to bullying. You always scare me like this, and I do too." A temperament. Thinking that his voice was like thunder, it was actually buzzing with mosquitoes and flies. Lu Qin said with a look of horror, "How bad is your temper?" Lu Qin slowly raised that hand. There was indeed a vibrating mountain and river in the palm of the third head teacher of Bai Yujing. Not to mention Chen Lingjun's series of rhetoric and fairy deeds on the side of the Sanjiao patriarch, but only on the side of the old Guanzhou, who has not been known for forgiving others but not forgiving people for thousands of years. It's really a miracle. In a picture of a long river of blurred time, the boy in Tsing Yi stood on tiptoe, patted a horn, and said that there was enough grass on the mountain. If this is the ascended realm cultivator of the Qingtong group, it is estimated that he will have been reincarnated by this time. Later, seeing the green bull turned his head, the boy in Tsing Yi was relieved, and finally came another sentence. As soon as he heard of eating, his comprehension came. It is estimated that if you change to the ascension realm of Taoist Nin, you can also follow Qingtong, and you can be a good company on Huangquan Road. Among the 14th realm monks, by Yes killing power, the monk's cleanliness, that is, the chicken soup monk's defense, are recognized as the first. But the old blind man of Shiwan Dashin, and the old master of the Taoist temple of the East China Sea, both offensive and defensive matters, are only less prominent than Bei and Xinqing. In the eyes of Sun Huaizhong of Xian Du Guan, the patriarch of the three sects, together with the little master, the second son of Taoism, and Bai Zhe, plus these four, can make up the second group of 10 tycoons in the world in thousands of years. Guizhuzhou smiled and said nothing. Chen Pingan asked, "What's wrong?" Guizhuzhou said with a smile, "Master, I don't know what's going on. The more you think, the less you talk. It's all so strange." Chen Pingan nodded sternly and said, "Very well, follow master." Qingtong has never seen a young hidden official with such gentle eyes. Li Huai suddenly said, "Chen Pingan, discuss something with you." Chen Pingan smiled and nodded, and followed Li Huai into the house. The Taoist Nin, who was at the door, was more nervous than Li Huai. After standing for a while, Taoist Nin thought it was more comfortable to sit down. Just like an awe-inspiring minister of bones and bones, however, he encountered a faint king who was unable to display his ambitions. Fortunately, he was appointed by the faint king as the minister of life. He went to the underground residence and carefully assisted His Royal Highness. Then one day, the old emperor assumed a posture of trusting the loneliness, saying that he would hand over all the treasures of the treasury to His Royal Highness, just like fighting open the skylight to speak bright words, and you will be responsible for supervising the country in the future. And this prince, at such a critical moment, was shocked. It's almost like that, the slight discrepancies can be ignored. How can the Nin Taoist sitting on the threshold not be nervous? The truth in the world is nothing more than a word of peace. Those good things that others can't ask for, son, Uncle Li Huai, little ancestor Li Huai, please settle down first. So many golden armored warriors who don't care about life and death, plus some poor worms who have become ghosts and then imprisoned in the golden armored warrior's belly cage, once they all recognize Li Huai as their master. If it was in that damaging Tongyi's Hao, as long as there was no one of the 14th realms blocking the way, it would be enough to sweep a continent. Li Huai has never had any taboos on Chen Pingan's side. Chen Pingan couldn't know who he was anyway. Before the old blind man was in the wild world, he forcibly dragged Li Huai and Taoist Nin into their dreams and returned to the great mountain. As a result, on the mountain top, a huge that had never been seen before appeared. Even if the opponent was kneeling on one knee, the head could be level with the mountain top. Almost not scared Li Huai to leave the dream directly. At that time, the old blind man helped stabilize Dao's heart, and Li Huai did not withdraw from the dream. The Taoist Nen of course recognized Li Huai very much, courage, but kind-hearted, not a seed of reading, but he can always come to light, and a few excellent truths popped out of his mouth. As for the old blind man's treatment of Li Huai, how he really thinks it is, anyway, it is all pleasing to the eye. It needs to be known that Li Huai is on the side of the old blind man. He is both a big disciple of the open mountain and a closed disciple. Chen Pingan listened patiently to Li Huai's words, and said softly, "Do you have two concerns?" Li Huai smiled, scratching his head, "You still know me best." Taoist Nen was quite curious. He originally thought that Li Huai was afraid of taking responsibility, so he used a dragging trick on the old blind man's side. Chen Pingan thought for a moment, and said slowly, "I think you won't accept the gift for the time being, there is no problem." Li Huai's worries are divided into two types. One is that he is worried about his badness. With thin arms and legs, the title of a Confucian sage has made Li Huai tremble. One more thing is what really makes Li Huai afraid to face. I'm afraid that most of the old blind man of the master, like an old man in his hometown, left everything behind, and then left one day without saying hello. Li Huai said softly, "But I'm a Confucian boy or Mr. Chi's student anyway, so I can definitely do something because I'm timid and keep hiding. Is it fair to say?" Chen Pingan smiled and said nothing. Li Huai asked, "Chen Pingan, how long is this temporary you said?" Chen Pingan opened the mouth and said, "Wait until you feel that you are not afraid anymore. If you make up your mind, you can." Li Huai asked, "Then if even the battle in the wild world is over, am I still unsure?" Chen Pingan did not answer this question directly, and asked with a smile, "Then I also have two ways of saying, one is nice and the other is ugly, do you want to listen?" Li Huai's eyes lit up, "It's hard to hear first." Chen Pingan said, "From the first day when you entered the school, Mr. Chi just hoped that you could study hard. The content of the book can be memorized and forgotten and memorized, but the word effort will not be lost and grow up. In the future, it is enough to know the book well, be a serious scholar who can read, can write spring festival couplets and keep accounts, so that your parents feel bright on their faces. Mr. Chi never thought of you, Li Huai. Be a big person in the general sense, and since the first day I met you, I have known how you are. To be honest, even now, I don't think I can talk to little Aquarius, Lin's show in reading. One they compare." Chen Pingan still has nothing to say. The old man in the backyard of the Young Family Drugstore also only hopes that your life in Li Huai will be safe and stable. And this request from the drugstore old man Yang doesn't need to be said, so Mr. Chi knows it, and Chen Pingan understands it too. In addition, the battle that took place between the two worlds was so strange that clouds and waves appeared endlessly. Once Li Huai jumped into the battlefield, he would be in it, with the mind and methods of Jiaoshan and clogs. Take out the chess pieces that are equivalent to Li Huai, and go to change the pieces. Li Huai also has a simple temperament and good-natured personality. If he is not careful, his mood will collapse. Even if he is fine, how can the old blind man not let Li Huai die on the battlefield, his heart? Chen Pingan has a deep understanding of the difficulty of remedying the human heart. Just a small example. On a certain battlefield, the golden-armored warriors who left the 100,000 mountains mightily gather into an army. Even if the barren world is defeated on that battlefield, the wild army only needs to use a few means to let the golden-armored warriors, inadvertently wounding dozens of Howren monks, or hundreds of thousands of Howren soldiers. I am afraid that Li Huai will feel guilty and uneasy in this life, and even wake up from nightmares countless times in his life. After a battle is over, and can't survive, the golden-armored men under Li Huai's are just like the books on the bookshelves in the house today. However, the whole world has high hopes for Li Huai. You are a sage of Shanaya Academy, a disciple of Qi Jingchen, and a disciple of Wensheng's lineage. You have such a key force of horror, why don't you want it? Join the battlefield. Even if Li Huai survived this difficult heart, she began to force herself to accept certain truths on the battlefield, and had to do things that departed from the books of sages and sages. Taking control of the army, and eventually continuing to lead the Golden Armor Army, all the way south, then Li Huai's future life will be like turning into another road. He may mature and become better because of this, and may even become a veritable gentleman of the academy, but, more it may be a long time, hard to let go, and I will live in guilt all my life. It seems that the truth is known, but I don't let myself go. But these words, this truth, Chen Pingan also, temporarily, didn't want to break with Li Huai and opened up. On the road of life, sometimes accept a very weighty truth, no matter how good the truth is, it is a big rock added to the backpack of a mountaineer. It can make people stagger, overwhelmed, and miserable. Li Huai wondered, this is already ugly. Chen Pingan smiled and said, it's nice that you, Li Huai, are a disciple of our Wenxing lineage. It's very simple, from your master Wenxing, to your mentor, Mr. Qi, and then to the master Bo Chui. Yang, around the second uncle, the third uncle Lu Shirley, and the young uncle Chen Pingan, we didn't contribute much in the previous battle that swept the two worlds, right? You are not less at all. Li Huai's face was stunned, and then dulled, it's not as bad as it sounds. The Taoist Nen at the door was immediately unhappy, your surname is Qin, why is it so bad? When my tender Taoist does not exist, do you dare to bully my son so blatantly? When we both make our way out of the road, if we have the ability, we will put aside our respective backers, and then get rid of some vacant identities, and afterwards, no one is allowed to hold grudges, practice hands, and learn from each other. Chen Pingan continued, Li Huai, believe in yourself. Outside the battlefield, you can do many things in the future. You can do academic studies and other things. Maybe some of these things, most of them, can be done by others. But there will always be something that Li Huai can really do. Whether it is as a child of Confucianism or living in the world, you still have to have this confidence. Li Huai looked up, I don't believe in myself, but I believe in you. Chen Pingan smiled and clapped his hands, this is not enough. Li Huai remembered something, picked up the book on the table, and asked casually, Chen Pingan, do you know Lu Yan who wrote this book? Chen Pingan smiled and nodded and said, not only do I know, but I have also seen this Lu Zhu, the Taoist name is Chunyang, and he is a very knowledgeable man who has a high level of truth. Like Mr. Qi, he is in the integration of the three religions. If there is really only this book, Fen Shrine, as long as the library of the book building has to walk through the water once, or suffer several battles, this inheritance will be completely cut off. With the means of the pure Yang Taoist, I think it will not be so desperate. But no matter what, this path is now in Li Huai. No, it's in your hands, Chen Pingan. Lu Chen Tusk said in amazement, with only 2 grains of rain money, I bought a Taoist book that directly refers to the Golden Core. This transaction is really profitable. If the top sect of China and Earth learns about this, don't talk about it. 2,000 Gu Yuqian are willing to nod, I'm afraid you will regret it, 4,000 Gu Yuqian is negotiable, and 8,000 is not unreasonable. If it is an unowned thing, it must be snatched wildly and left in the Qingming world, I am afraid it's just a great chaos. I don't know how many of the upper 5 realms are going to fight for this, and how many immortals are going to fight with their brains, and they die for the 1,000-year plan of the sect's incense. This sword tactic left by the Taoist Chunyang is simply a secret book tailored for you on Shindu Mountain. There are thousands of secrets in the Taoist book of the world. Who dares to say that he points to the Golden Core? The key is the sword tactic. Chen Pingan and Li Huai laughed and said, "This book is of great significance. Because it involves the swordsmanship inheritance of that pure Sun Taoist, it is of great value. If you don't accept it, I will accept it." There is a line of swords and immortals in the world, and the Qingming Xuandu Temple is a well-deserved ancestor, but when it comes to Liu Yan, it has a new face and another peak. Li Huai's face doesn't matter, he can eat as much food as he holds in his hand, knowing how many caddies he has, and how much strength he can use. This is Li Huai's consistent aim of being a person. This time it was Lu Chen's turn to be dumbfounded. Chen Pingan really accepted it. Don't go back to the old profession and become the good boy. The Taoist Nen was even more anxious, scorching his anger, and said in his heart, "My son, I can't give it to you. I can't bring it to the door by myself, but I am pushed out of the door with your hands. I can't use it, let alone the wild world. Every time you break your head, you have to grab your hands." Even in the Howren world, who likes to be polite and rule-based, doesn't it also have the phrase, "Heaven's gift is not taken back by the blame"? Young master, even if we want to give it to Chen Pingan. If you leave the original book, it's a big deal for the son to let Chen Pingan copy the book casually. There are a lot of people, wouldn't everyone be happy? Li Huai shook his head and said, "What do you want to do so much?" The Taoist Nen was overwhelmed, but after holding back for a long time, he smiled bitterly and shook his head, and stopped persuading Li Huai. "My dear son, how come I, old and tender, put you on such an uncle who doesn't take chances as chances?" Chen Pingan took out 5 booklets from his sleeves and handed them to Li Huai, with a smile, "The task is complete." It was Li Huai's previous difficulties in reading. He gave Chen Pingan 2 books at the Confucian Temple. After the Confucian Temple's discussions, Chen Pingan was always more attentive, and would often show them to meticulously solve puzzles, even as long as he had a different experience. Just add refills in the blank space, just like in the Wang Xinghua Hall of the Tongis Hao Dequan dynasty. He once took out his pen and ink, and then in the Changchundongtian that was temporarily used as a dojo in Xiandushan, Chen Pingan, it's not easy to ask questions, and it's even harder to answer questions. So Li Huai gave 2 books. When Chen Pingan returned today, there were 5 in total. Moreover, the 3 books on Chen Ping's are all in teeny lower letters. And at the end of the last booklet, a large list of titles of various cited books were carefully marked. Li Huai took the booklet, "I'll read it carefully, so I'll look through it." Chen Pingan walked out of the house alone, and after crossing the threshold, he found that Lu Chen had nothing to do and had already left for a stroll. "I heard before that there are more female cultivators from Huangliang School, especially in Lushan, where the yin and the yang are about to be susceptible." The Taoist Nen who had been sitting on the threshold stood up and stood in the corridor outside the door with Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan said in his heart, "This book written by Lu Zhu will be given to Li Huai again before I go down the mountain, so that he can read it several times in his spare time. When you want to borrow it, ask Li Huai." Taoist Nen smiled and said, "It's easy to talk and talk. This trouble, going round and round, isn't it a mischance?" Chen Pingan continued, "The old saying goes that you have a sharp blade and you have a murderous heart. This truth must not be taken carelessly. The Taoist Nen is in a good mood at the moment, so he is willing to perfuse this young hidden official, otherwise I will break these empty words with me. Did you find the wrong person? My Tao Ting is not your Confucian child, nor is it the Howren monk, so I just said casually, the hermit is right, you deserve to be the son of a saint who has broken thousands of books." Chen Pingan didn't take it seriously. He just didn't hear the sarcasm in the Taoist nun's words, and said to himself, "The old blind man arranged you next to Li Huai, just let you be responsible for protecting the road, so don't do that. Preaching things that are superfluous. If it weren't for whether to accept the golden armored warrior, you would be kind, but you have an eagerness in your heart. didn't you how to sway Li Huai to agree to it? Otherwise, I will let you know what will happen if I dare to ruin the innocent heart of my wenching disciple, dare to disturb Li Huai's ordinary heart. Whether you believe it or not, as long as I feel that you have done something wrong in this matter, and take Li Huai on the wrong road based on personal preference, then don't blame me for not reminding you, unless you Tao Ting can rush to me. Before, I had fled all the way to 100,000 mountains, otherwise the old blind man would not be able to protect you. The Taoist Nen looked cloudy and uncertain and said nothing. I wanted to say something cruel, but the Taoist Nen restrained it after the words came to his lips a few times. In the end, I just feel the aggrieved Nen Taoist can only suffocate a strange saying that is lacking in confidence, and he did not dare to confront the young man directly in words. But today, the calm but sharp-edged young hermit is still talking to himself over there. Take 10,000 steps and say, even if you escape to 100,000 mountains, the old blind man can protect you for a while, but still can't protect you. A generation. The Taoist Nen looked at him from the corner of his eye, in a blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, his hands in his sleeves, his back against the wall. Only then did I remember one thing. Calculated according to the cultural heritage of the Confucian temple, this guy really seems to be Li Huai's little uncle. That's it, Wen Xing's line of protection is known to the Taoist Nen, and all the world knows it. The Taoist Nen definitely didn't want to go to personally learn to verify the truth of this matter. Besides, Chen Pingan is Li Huai's little uncle, and I am Li Huai's protector. It is half of my family's relationship. I closed the door and said a few nasty things, bear it. It's just that Taoist Nen always feels that he hasn't seen him for a few days, and the guy next to him seems to have changed a lot. Was it because of a trip to the wild hinterland and Naduyue Mountain? More than that, it seems that the current trip has made this young hidden official on a certain path, and gaining more. In an instant, the Taoist Nen saw the young hidden official, and squinted his eyes suddenly. I was scared by a few big words from the younger generation. I only saw the head beheaded instead of the draft, right? The young hidden official moved, smiled and patted the Taoist Nen's shoulder. What's more, Senior is not afraid of the shadow leaning. The Taoist Nen let out a dry smile. It seems more useless. This is considered to be given a date by the young hermit and knocked on a stick. Chen Pingan finally said, it's better to say ugly things first, and it's better to be resentful in the future. If you complain in pairs, you will fight for life and death, and feel that no one is wrong. Taoist Nen nodded. This truth is simple and superficial, it is more real. After Chen Pingan and Taoist Nen recounted the past, there was no Baiyu Jinglu as the head teacher. Chen Lingjun in the courtyard still cowered, with a restrained look and difficult to speak. So many people lost face on the ground and couldn't pick it up. Chen Pingan stepped down the steps and came to Chen Lingjun, like an unknown prophet, and smiled. Why, have you seen the emperor of the Mengliang kingdom? Come on, at the wine table, I told Huang Tsong to boast about the sea. It is a promise that I am sure. Will he serve as the chief consecration of Mengliang country, the famous Gesh Qing? Chen Lingjun smiled and said awkwardly, that's too ignorant of the world. I can't, absolutely can't. Quickly winked at Guozhujiu, you are my master's little disciple, speaking more effectively than me. Guozhujiu really kept his promise and helped out the siege. He roughly talked about the conversation between Chen Lingjun and the young emperor. Chen Pingan reached out and held Chen Lingjun's head. Chen Ling shrank his neck. Chen Pingan smiled and said, you can serve as the royal worship of Mengliang country, you can be named, as for the chief title, even if it is the genus of flood dragon, once it is too deeply involved with Guozhua, it will be more troublesome in the future. In addition, Miyu, you discuss it with him. Miyu himself is willing to make multiple offerings or the status of a guest, but I won't stop it. In addition, the genealogical monk serves as a guest dedicated to the guest, but all those who are named will need to be recorded at the Patriarch Hall of Jiaisfeng. If you ask about it, just push it on me. Chen Lingjun suddenly raised his head and said in surprise, Master promised this matter. Chen Pingan nodded and said in a bad mood, brilliant. Chen Lingjun hugged his master's arm, tears of gratitude. When will the master go home? I will prepare the ingredients and let the old cook make a big table of delicious food. I knew this a long time ago. I saw the lonely Master Lu before. I was afraid of it. Uncle, I just jumped up and spit on your face. Chen Pingan held down the head, gently pushed it away, and stared. Don't encourage Bai Xian to go to any night banquet in the future to suppress Wei Shanjun's limelight. You can't figure it out. Chen Lingjun gave a cry. Chen Pingan said, I don't need money for the gift for participating in the Pian Mountain Night Tour banquet. Ugh. Chen Lingjun suddenly realized, smiled brightly and said, it's still the master that counts as an all-out plan. Afterwards, Chen Pingan was going to visit Huang Tsong, the emperor of Mengliang Kingdom, and asked Guozhuzhou if he wanted to be with him. Guozhuzhou shook his head and couldn't say it. It seemed meaningless. Chen Lingjun straightened his chest and began to recommend himself, but the master did not agree. After Chen Pingan left, and Lu Chen was no longer there, the boy in Tsing Yi threw his sleeves away, and began to wonder about the young fellow who wore a power fence. Chen Lingjun cautiously began to close, friends of the fellow Daoist, if I guess correctly, you are starting in the ascended realm. Qing Tong took off the power fence. There was a slight surprise. This Yuanying realm water bird's vision is so good. Regardless of the depth of the ascended realm's cultivation level and the level of lethality, Qing Tong is quite proud of the matter of hiding the weather, and he never wanted to be seen through by this boy in Tsing Yi. Seeing that the young fellow Daoist did not admit that he did not deny, Chen Lingjun knew it in his heart. He was a little bit complacent, and looked at what is dripping water, that's it. Guessing the realm of that strange monk is actually the same as guessing the number, as long as experience if it is rich enough, it is very simple. Chen Lingjun exchanged a few words with this young fellow who claimed to be from Tonggishao. As if thinking of something, he ran out of the yard to find someone. Outside a house in Lushan, there are 2 ancient pines in front of the door, each with lingshao flowers on it. The mountain breeze is soft, the flowers are as big as a bowl, and they fall slowly without separating from the branches. Lu Chen squatted under the tree and saw a flower falling to the ground. He still didn't want to get up, as if to wait until another flower fell. A group of passing female cultivators saw this scene and saw that the young Taoist priest was more handsome and more interesting. They had low eyebrows, squinted squints, and laughed. Lu Chen stood up and made a call with those sisters and sisters. Just as they were about to sign up for their own account, they still had things to do, but they only repaid the courtesies a little, and then they left. After that, Lu Chen continued to wander all the way, thinking about the idleness in the market. When the boy in Tsing Yi finally saw the figure of Master Lu from a distance, he saw the young Taoist priest squatting on the side of the road, pointing his finger at a stone on the ground, cursing, when people eat hot meals, dogs have to eat hot shit, that's good, it's delicious and lazy. I like to provoke right and wrong and be the stumbling block, right? It annoys me, not hitting you, hitting the dog. Chen Lingjun took the courage and walked towards that Lu Chen, then squatted aside without speaking. Lu Chen turned his head and smiled and asked, "What are you doing?" Chen Lingjun took a deep breath, with firm eyes, and said, "Teacher Lu, don't involve my master and Luopashan in our affairs, okay?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "It's weird, what's the matter with us?" When Chen Lingjun said these words, it seemed that he had run out of courage. Let me take a moment to say a few more words in my heart, and then reason with you. Lu Qin smiled and said, "Stop spitting on my face." Chen Lingjun's eyes turned sharply, and he had to find a way to make up for it. Lu Qin said, "I heard that Daoist Jingqing is on the side of Luopa Mountain, and he has newly recognized a nephew whose surname is Xing." Chen Lingjun said in embarrassment, "Nothing." Before the gate of his mountain, a surnamed Xing came, and he looked like a scholar with a little money. At the beginning, he claimed to be the apprentice of his brother Chinjulio, so Chen Lingjun didn't take it too seriously. Only later, when I saw Master Wen Xing and Debaigo were very polite on the side of the scholar surnamed Xing, even Debaigo was rarely eaten up by an outsider, and Chen Lingjun immediately realized that something was wrong. After thinking about it, I only felt that the surname Xing, anyway, was not the demon giant of Baidi City, then everything was easy to discuss. The Taoist Nin just doesn't know your series of great achievements, otherwise he will be willing to fall for the wind. Lu Qin smiled and stood up, kicked off the stone, shot out like an arrow, passed between the branches of an ancient pine, and finally went off the cliff, stunned the geese in the sky, nodded and said, "Between the wooden geese, the change of dragon and snake." Chen Lingjun followed up and said softly, "I said that before, so I agreed as Master Lu." After Lu Qin held his hands, he walked slowly, and said, "It's not a bad thing, what are you afraid of?" "I walked away from Jiao Jiao, but I just entered the nascent soul realm and failed to become Yu Pu, then what will you do next time?" Qi Du walked into the sea. "How about becoming the Jade Pure realm? What about the Immortal realm? Ascension realm? Now there is a real dragon in the vast world. The person who slashes the dragon is in harmony, so he can afford the next one. It may not be able to accommodate two. But if you go to Qingming world, there will be no other sight in the cave. I only need to give you a Baiyujing amulet." Chen Lingjun shook his head and said, "I don't want to leave home so far." Then Chen Lingjun asked the question that he hadn't understood for many years, "Teacher Lu, you are so advanced in Taoism, and your status is so prominent. Why do you compare this with me?" In fact, Chen Lingjun asked his master privately, but Chen Pingan's answer was a more mountain statement, and it will finally come to light. It also made Chen Ling not think about it too much, and it would come naturally. Now that the master said so, Chen Lingjun didn't really think about it. If it weren't for meeting Lu Qin today, Chen Lingjun would just think that he didn't have this kind of thing, and he was thinking about the mysterious things. Competing with you. It's not counted. It's just an old account. I haven't been able to turn it over. If I don't delay my practice, it's just a concern. It's always going to be smoothed out. Lu Qin put his fingers together and knocked on the head of the boy in Tsing Yi. He smiled and said, "You can't learn a little bit from your master. Look at Qin Pingan. He has been traveling abroad all year round, and he has broken the world in his cultivation. Who doesn't envy it when it goes up?" Chen Lingjun touched his head and did not look up. He walked with Lu Qin, soundly saying, "But the master doesn't want to be away from home all the year round. He is not thinking of Mrs. Shanju, and then he wants to help that Qi. Sir, look at the rivers and lakes more, you think the master does not want to be safe." Lu Qin looked shocked and said, "Friend Jingqing, I used to be poor and clumsy. So you are not a fool." When Chen Lingjun heard this, and then thought of Guazijia's remarks from his master, his waist became hard and he shook his head. Of course he didn't dare to fly those 2 sleeves. Lu Qin suddenly kicked Chen Lingjun's ass. "Go away, when I want to travel to the Qingming world someday, I can come to Baiyujing to find me." Chen Lingjun staggered, rubbed his butt, and ran away without looking back. "Go to Baiyujing to find you. I'm looking for you, uncle." Lu Qin smiled and said, "Huh." This memory was really eaten by the Taoist Nin. The boy in Tsing Yi didn't know his heart well, but he didn't dare to stop. His pace was faster, and he ran out of sight in an instant. Qing Tong was so bored, he went out to relax. For some reason, Qing Tong was stared a little by the little girl named Guozhujiu before. The little girl didn't open her mouth to say anything, she just walked around and practiced boxing in a pretended way, but she had a blue eye from time to time. When Qing Tong went out, he saw the sweaty boy in Tsing Yi, brushing past himself and smashing into the door quickly. As a result, Qing Tong found that in a pavilion on the edge of a cliff, among Yingying and Yen Yen, Master Lu was showing palmistry to a group of female practitioners. The young Taoist priest squeezed the palm of a woman with one hand, and gently pointed at the palm of the woman with the other hand, and said something about the landscape and appearance of the palm pattern corresponding to the landscape, and then mixed with a few words of emotion, saying that since ancient times, but a woman, such as my sister with such a good color, and the talented person, always get together less, which means that the gold buyer will not meet the gold seller. In the end, I can only ask you Lao to open his eyes and be more pitiful. With marriage, I am afraid that I will be unsatisfied. In the end, I have a shadow, the country is beautiful, and I am sad to teach others to look at it. Fortunately, it is good to see my sister's palmistry through the trail. The fortune is a little bit thinner, only to say this love road, but it is definitely going well. After that, the young Taoist priest who was particularly proficient in palmistry and facial expression changed the woman and continued to look at palmistry, and the female nuns from Lushan were all smiling. A girlish-looking young female cultivator withdrew her hand and asked curiously, "Tao Master Lu, I have also been to God's sect with Master. Why haven't I heard of you Kuogwen?" The young Taoist priest said, "Little Taoist temple is a small Taoist temple. You have never heard of Sister Lin, and it is normal. Every time the peaks are celebrated, or the sects give the urn, the poor Taoist can be there, that is, the position is relatively backward, not conspicuous, so I must have missed Sister Lin." The girl nodded, "Probably so. I heard that there are dozens of large and small Taoist temples of the gods, and the Taoist lineage is very complicated." The young Taoist priest is anxious. "Why don't you ask who Feng Dao is climbing with today? It's a pity that they didn't look at the palmistry less, and they still failed to ask about it. That's it, the matter is over, the poor road will not be hidden. Poor Dao must reveal his identity with you. But before that, let's talk a few words with a senior." On the other side of the courtyard, Taoist Nen had been using his hand to watch the mountains and rivers, watching the movements of the Taoist priest Lu Fu from a distance in his heart. When the young Taoist squatted on the side of the road and pointed at a stone over there, Taoist Nen stopped beating. "I have nothing to do with a young hermit, and I am afraid that you are a Taoist priest who has a stern view of the gods. It's just that the Taoist Nen is very hot in the end, and never made a sound. When he came to follow his son, he was very self-cultivating and nurturing. Moreover, the Taoist Nen also gave birth to a bit of guard. Could it be that his ancestor was far away in Baiyujing?" The second little Taoist priest, already aware of his prying. "If this is the case, how could it be a fairyland, but this person is destined not to be that Tianjun Qizhen? Is it an old ancestor in the Godzong mountain who never shows his face? In this awe-inspiring world, everything is good, it is troublesome, and the slightest bit is not profitable." Talking about patrons, preaching, and patriarch. Lu Qin showed his sister's palmistry, and smiled with a heartfelt voice, "How long will seniors look at?" Taoist Nen laughed and said, "Dao Changlu has a keen sense of mind and is quite good." Lu Qin sighed, as if he was afraid that the other party would not notice his own thoughts, so he said his own thoughts, stomping his feet and said, "The trail is called a madness. One by one, they bully the poor road and have a good temper, right? Forget it for Chen Pingon. After all, Peng Dao is a half-month-old who helped this guy with his own hands, but you, a tender Daoist, dare to be so unscrupulous, so unreasonable." For an instant, Sort of coming. Chapter 941. In the pavilion, the atmosphere is much more harmonious. As soon as I heard that the head of Lu Daoist who looked at him in the dark, he turned out to be a distinguished guest who climbed with Qin Shanju, and he was silent for a while. Of course I can't believe it, but no matter how incredible it is, I have to believe it. After all, who dares to fake this kind of thing? The original female sisters who were tired and lazy, one by one, looked serious, and looked at the young Taoist master. They became more and more handsome. The young Taoist priest is like a storyteller at the foot of the mountain. He began to reminisce about the past. Although Xiao Dao and Qin Shanju are not from the same hometown, they are acquaintances in trouble when they met in the microtime. We met two teenagers. At that time, the Trail and Qin Shanju were not successful, and then the Trail and Qin Shanju fell in love with each other, so they went out together for a long journey. I once stayed at a city temple overnight, sleepwalking to the rich and wealthy fortune division, and saw that purple the chief officer of fortune with the appearance of a judge with a jade belt and a jade belt. When a woman heard this, she couldn't help interrupting the young Taoist priest's speech, and asked doubtfully, "In the city god's office, is there such a place as the rich and wealthy department?" There are many government offices, such as the capital city god temple in the capital of Mengliang Kingdom, and the many county city temples with few yamen. It seems that there is no such division. The women in the pavilion shook their heads, apparently they had never heard of it. The young Taoist sighed, "No, things are so weird. Anyway, I have seen a lot of weird things. For example, Cheng Huang's subordinates are holding a group of criminals. Cheng Huang is going to be tried at night. Among them is the woman with a rope hanging around her neck, dressed in red, with a miserable complexion. She habitually raised her head, sticking out her tongue slightly, and a woman wearing shackles walking in the corridor, like a row of water, full of green silk floating like water, and then there are still 5 nobles. The sons of the aristocratic family, with a large group of beautiful concubines and maids, came to see the chief officer of the Qing Huang temple for a drink. In the middle of the night, there was another woman in a white dress riding a white horse. She called herself Bai, who was practicing under the Qingqing mountain. The celestial beings, come here to rest for a while. There are so many weird, dizzying eyes, and it's really 100 years of things in the world overnight. The Trail wakes up afterwards, thinks about it, and then read some ancient books, just like you are puzzled, so I dare not take it seriously. Fortunately, those who are raised on stones have a root stumbling. There are no relatives or 6 relatives. The Trail is a coincidence. It is a relative of the Taoist priest of the superintendent of the Divine Envoy sect. Accepting disciples, but accepting disciples on behalf of the teacher. After that, even if the Trail begins to formally practice, as for Qin Shanju, the city's god's temple was rich and prosperous, and it was a great fortune. It is really like the dragon falling into the mire. Unbearable, mosquitoes and flies are full of scales, trapped in the cage, and finally one day, the wind and rain are dull, just waiting for the thunderbolt. The mud dragon in the pond is full of spirits, and it goes straight into the air. 2 flowers bloom, one on each side. The Trail will not go into details about the many feats of Qin Shanju after that. Just say that when the Trail has been cultivated into the fairy law, the mountain people live in secluded, quiet and extremely thinking, then they will start to travel down the mountain, experience in the red dust, meet the demons and descend the demons, see the sneaky and kill the sneaky, so happy. It is also considered to have won a big reputation in the rivers and lakes. I wandered all the way to a place of historical interest, separated by a big river and 2 mountains facing each other. Since ancient times, there has been a saying that turtles and snakes lock the river. But guess what? It's such a place with strong water transportation, but I just met one. In a severe drought that has not happened in hundreds of years, the people don't have a chance to live, and the Trails have cultivated immortal skills, but they are still old-fashioned. asking for an explanation. Okay, I don't take the trails seriously at all. I just ate a closed door, and the trails will endure. Then the lower reaches look for the Hujuan mansion on the old site of the Dragon Palace, and borrow water from the lake. So I went to the upper reaches of the riverbed, but still to no avail, but the trail was angry, so I had to go out in person, and did not close my eyes for several days, just to study a fairy family talisman, about the heart of the innocent child, touch the gods and the earth. This road has a very high threshold. The big talisman, I really learned the little way. Take a bath, change clothes, fast, go to the high building by the river, burn the talisman paper into the wine, and then threw the wine glass out of the building after drinking only half a cup of wine on the trail. Pouring out like a waterfall, a steady stream of water pours into the dry riverbed, where there is a live fish. From then on, the river is turbulent and the vegetation is lush. The nuns in the pavilion looked at each other. Should we cheer a few times, or should we question a few words? Tao Master Lu, although you are a cultivator of the middle five realm, you are the lowest level of the Dongfu realm after all. To say that the big talisman, the threshold is extremely high, is it a bit too much? It is important to know that at the moment in the pavilion, there is a Sevuing realm and 2 Dongfu realm trainers sitting. Qin Tong began to move to another place, and didn't plan to continue to listen. The more Lu Zhangjiao talked, the more it became more meaningless. Others brag about not drafting, they are all boasting about themselves. Lu Qin is different, is it the opposite? When an old man in yellow came to the pavilion, Ying Ying and Yan Yan had already dispersed. There was only one young Taoist priest wearing a fishtail crown. The hip flask, the one who helped to read and tell the story with the fairy before, took the saliva of a water tank, and had to drink a little wine to moisturize and refresh his throat. Lu Qin saw Taoist Nin stopping outside the pavilion, beckoning and smiling. Sit down and talk. Only then did Taoist Nin dare to step up the steps. In that illusion before, the two parties hadn't talked with each other, and Lu Qin quickly sent the Taoist Nin gift out of the country. Lu Qin asked, Senior Tao Ting didn't tell Li Huai about his poor status, right? Taoist Nin shook his head, don't dare to branch out. First, there was a reminder that the young hidden official was almost threatening, and then there was the beating of the head teacher of Baiyu Jinglu. At this time, the tender Taoist was not confident and arrogant. Lu Qin smiled and said, Chen Pingon made those ruthless words with you, didn't he feel unhappy in his heart? Taoist Nin twitched his lips, Chen Pingon is for my son's sake in the end. Lu Qin rubbed his chin, this statement is correct, but it is not particularly accurate. Taoist Nin humbly asked for advice, I beg Master Lu to solve my doubts. Lu Qin said, Chen Pingon is from Ni Ping Alley, you know. Taoist Nin nodded and said, of course. That alley is a place where dragons and tigers are hidden. Chen Pingon, King Song Mu of the Dali domain, Shu, the true Dragon King, and Gu Kan, the Baidi city, are also the hometown and ancestral home of Chao Shi, the sword immortal of Nanpa Suozhou. Lu Qin leaned back against the railing and said lazily, in the old alley, there was a little slug who was nicknamed a slug by Chen Pingon and Lu Xianyang. Well, he is our little disciple of Mr. Zheng from Beidasheng. Taoist Nin said, Feng Shui is so frightening. Lu Qin raised a hand and pointed in a random direction. One of the 5 greatest blessings placed on the table in the Lizhu cave in the past was a small loach, which was caught by Chen Pingon from the fields and ridges. Gu Kan's eyes were greedy. Chen Pingon always regarded him as a half-brother, and of course he would not be stingy, so he gave it to Gu Kan. Gu Kan was raised in the family's water tank. Later, he met Lu Zhimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang in Shijianhu, and worshipped his master. The mother and daughter went to Qingsha Island with Lu Zhimao together. They parted ways. The 14-year-old straw shoe boy began to travel to the Great Sui dynasty. Qi Jingchen sent a group of students to him to the Mountain Cliff College. The youngest one is Li Huai. Lu Qin shook his sleeves. Chen Ping and doesn't want to make the same mistake. Taoist Nen said, I also hope Master Lu will elaborate on the reason. Lu Qin sighed. Pan Dao said so, still can't understand. His face was helpless. Lu Qin shook the jug, still raised the bowl and raised his head. Only a few drops of wine entered his mouth and wiped his mouth. The chance for the little loach was given to Gu Ken by Chen Pingon himself. Gu Ken was so young at that time, so why didn't he talk about being unsatisfactory? How did Chen Pingon tell you the previous sentence? With a sharp blade and killing heart, right? In that Shujian lake, which can be regarded as a little wild world, the owner of a water dragon in the nascent soul stage is a big boy. Life-saving talisman is also a kind of an unmatched hatchet, like walking into a large field of rapeseed flowers. A child with stubborn temperament, unconstrained, holding an hatchet, what he sees in his eyes is naturally delicate, and delicate the rapeseed flowers can be chopped and chopped at will. You may not be able to see the snakes and worms hidden in the fields and the owners of the rapeseed flowers. At the same time, that little loach has to be fed up in order to keep climbing on its own avenue. For example, if you want to move the peach pavilion to refine the mountain, you belong to the dragon. What else can you practice faster than directly eating the kikamin? The road, this is the nature of the little loach, and it is in agreement with Gu Kan's heart. Both the master and the servant are like a kind of a small harmony, coupled with Lu Zimeo's cold-eyed observation, it is naturally a murderous intent. All around, one fierce outburst. That's why Chen Pingon was almost tortured by his senior brother Cui Yang. Only a little bit, his mood was completely broken. If I remember correctly, he once said to Gu Ken, sorry, I'm late. Of course, the qualities of Li Huai and Gu Ken are very different when they looked at the two children back then. The two people of the same age look at the same timidity, but Gu Ken knows that they are weak. Li Huai only dared to lie down, but it was precisely because he had a warm family, and Li Huai knew the kindness of his relatives at a very young age. Gu Ken and Li Huai are like two kinds of life. One is extremely unhappy and wants to live a better life in the future. One is a poor home, which seems like life is not easy, but in fact, it is an extremely rare lucky thing for family members to sit and relax. Therefore, we must maintain this hard-won experience in the future. Good. So once Li Huai is led by you, and becomes a person who will disappoint Mr. Qi in Chen Ping's mind, you will die, you will definitely. You are self-reliant, but you have always looked down on a young hidden official with a low level, but you don't know it. In fact, since Chen Pingon first learned that you became Li Huai's servant, he began to help you prepare a book. When he participated in the discussion at the Confucian Temple, in that Yuan Yangzu, you thought that you were trembling with power, and felt quite contented in your heart, but Chen Pingon had been watching with cold eyes, so today I arrived in Lushan and said a few candid words with you, lest he will kill you in the future, and Senior Tao Ting will still feel wronged. Lu Chen sighed, stretched out his finger, and clicked on the yellow-clothed old man. Previously, the poor road squatted on the road and cursed a stone as a stumbling block. People eat hot meals and dogs eat hot shit. Are you chewing on the aftertaste now? Well, what do you think of Tao Ting Sr., this expression? But I misunderstood the poor road, and the poor road does not mean eating hot. What's the aftertaste of chewing shit? Poor Dao means that there is something in your speech, and it is deliberate. Like a Daoist like the poor Dao, talking and chatting, it is always difficult to go straight to the midwinter, and it has to be a little bit mysterious to match the identity. Taoist Nen looked embarrassed, so he had to say with ignorance of his conscience, Zhang Jiaolu is a philanthropist. It is both witty and far-reaching. Lu Chen smiled, turned his head and looked at the landscape outside the pavilion. If we regard each person in a mountain and a river as every word in an article, then you will miss too much. I have been practicing poor Taoism for so many years. There are only a handful of Taoists who have been tirelessly pursuing no fault, and who can approach infallibility. Chen Pingan can be counted as one. Of course, he is still the youngest one, and for the time being the one with the lowest Taoism. Taoist Nan asked cautiously, "Why is Master Lu willing to give me some suggestions?" Lu Chen sighed, "Are you an ascended realm great monk, isn't it also a word? You are still such a big word, standing in front of Pin Dao's eyes, how can Pin Dao miss it? People have no fault and life is missed. Missing things, missing people, thinking over and over again, are all faults, past faults." Lu Chen looked sad, and looked up at the sky several times, wondering if he would leave without saying goodbye and escape. Even if it is destined to avoid the first day of the junior high school, but not the 15th. But as long as you survive the first day of the new year, doesn't it mean that you have 14 more days of stability? The young emperor of Mengliang, the goddess of water with the surname Nalan, Jun Maishan, still sat 2 stops and stayed in the pavilion. Huang Tsong hopes that the two of them will be more casual, but the two deities of mountains and rivers just abide by the courtesy of monarchs and ministers. In fact, this is not a common occurrence in the officialdom of Shanshui. It is not necessary for the monarchs of the 5 mountains in a country, and the highest water in the country, to meet the emperor and monarch. But as a former military commander of the heroic spirit, Maishan Jun recognized the young emperor from the bottom of his heart, and Maishan Jun refused to sit down. Nalan Yuji, who was ranked as the Golden Jade genealogy, had to accompany him. Suddenly a young Taoist priest appeared. Nalan Yuji quietly pinched his fingers, and smiled. "I am so courageous, I went to the mansion privately. I saw that the young Taoist priest began to pretend to be crazy and behave stupidly. Did the trail go to the wrong door? It's all right, it seems that the trail and this sister have something to do with it. Fate. Wearing a fishtail crown, that is the Taoist priest of the gods. In Aquarius Island, no one would dare not take the golden rules and jade rules of the gods so seriously, and would pretend to be the gods of the gods." Jun Maishan glanced at the Taoist priest and said in his heart, "Your Majesty, this Taoist priest is indeed from the gods, because there is a lantern hanging behind him with the words Kiwagwan secret, and he is the kind of person who has the shade of the master and the ancestor. It looks like a cultivator in the Dragon Gate realm, but he is actually a golden core earth immortal, but it should have been formed just a few years ago, and the weather is unstable." Nalan Yuji frowned and said, "How did this guy get in? Why is there no chi ripple at all?" Jun Maishan sneered, "The ghost knows." Huang Tsong signaled that they don't need to be nervous. The visitors are the guests. There are many monks on the mountain who eat xia yinlu and are immortal, but there are few people who have weird temperament, have partial skills, and enjoy the game of the world. Few. Since I came to the wrong place, Pan Dao would be wrong. The young Taoist priest rushed up the steps, stood still, and after losing his hands, he looked down at the game with a clear victory and defeat, and nodded. "The one who holds the white side is a top expert." The Water Empress stretched out her hand to touch her eyebrows. She said that she was sure of the stinky chess basket. Huang Tsong was still calm, and asked with a smile, "Dare to ask Dao Master, why do you say this? How do I think black is a sure win? The one who holds the white is oneself. Playing chess is one of the most boring things in the world. If you bet on high, you will lose, but if you go high, there is no lose." The young Taoist priest twisted the white pieces in one hand and the black pieces in the other. He placed it on the chessboard with a crackling sound, crisp and sweet. While placing the pieces on the chessboard, he smiled and said, "On the gambling table, unless it's an old one, you will be the best player." Lu Qin smiled and said, "The opposite will move towards Tao, and the opposite will move towards Tao. The world generally acknowledges that the matter of cultivating Taoism is going against the sky. Everyone recognizes it, but no one wants to talk more. Real people live on land, immortal masters move mountains and seas, lift the sun and the moon, live forever, live with the heavens and the earth, and so on. Isn't it the biggest, great rebellion in the world? As a result, this group of people has become a master of human beings. Is it considered a slander in the world? Chen Pingan and the young emperor left, came here, walked into the pavilion, did not take off those cloth shoes, sat cross-legged on the bench, took out the dry tobacco rod, tied the pipe to the bamboo rod, and began to rub the tobacco, mixed with wild mountains. Shenmozi, sweet-scented osmanthus, dry tobacco rods were dropped into a small piece of no-character jade plate with a red string. Tell me, what does that Zhou think? Lu Qin shrunk his shoulders, leaned against the pavilion, and leaned on the bench. He looked up at the sky. Hao Ran Jiaxing, whose real name is Jia Mo, is not suitable for words and he will be silent. He is a talented person. When he has become a wild old fox, known as the sky and the sea, he is really careful in doing things. Chen Pingan smiled and said, I need you to say these old almanacs. Lu Chen said, because Pang Dao has never dealt with him, he can only make some guesses. He probably thinks that only when we have us can we distinguish between good and evil, and the difference between right and wrong. There is no reason to talk to this kind of person. To put it nicely, the two sides quarrel, tell the chicken to talk to the duck, or say that the public is reasonable and the wife is reasonable. I can't persuade the other party. Maybe it's called Dideo different ways. To put it ugly, the other side is a kind of road that has been self-certified, can justify itself, and do its own way. As for the road under Zhou's feet, can it be called a certain way? Seeing the avenue now, you can't see it, and someone will look back later. No matter who it is now, of course the poor master is an exception. For the rest of us, how carefully the avenue evolves is not necessarily what Zhou has in mind. The way you think about it. But in the current situation, no one wants to be the repeat customer, and they don't want to do that in the future. Therefore, the previous riverside discussion, even the fierce ant in our continent, one in order to be among the 14th, she is the one who can refine everything, but she is the first cultivator to propose to dismiss Zhou. Of course, it's not that she has an antagonism with Zhou, or she knows that Zhou's future is definitely not the future she wants in my continent. Chen Pingan smiled and said, this my continent, I will never take the initiative to provoke her. The implication is that you and my continent don't come to provoke me. Lu Qin hesitated for a moment, raised his hand, rolled his sleeves vigorously. The landscape was hazy, two Taoist priests were faintly visible, sitting and talking. A middle-aged Taoist priest with a hibiscus crown on his head and a gentle temperament. A young Taoist priest, wearing a lotus crown, was suave and romantic. Before he left by Yujing, he had an extremely exhausting deduction in front of his junior brother Lu Qin, and finally came up with 3 results. One is that everyone can practice, and they are all cultivators. All the spiritual beings who are expected to develop their body and form can also practice steadily. In this way, will the whole world be in an orderly manner. It can even be the monk of the 10,000 races in the world, no longer need to fight on the snail horns, no need to send this body in the stone flames, but merge into a long river of brilliance, and travel together again and again to explore the world, to open up the territory, and each choose one. Chuxingchen serves as the dojo, each branching out. Second, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth is completely gathered in a few places, and the world seems to have entered an age of impossibility to do the end of the law early, falling into a situation where it is difficult for clever women to cook without rice. Therefore, there are spiritual beings in the world, except for a handful of hanging. In addition, without exception, they are not allowed to practice, and these people must not interfere with the movement of the heavens and the earth. At most they are confined to a certain one corner of the earth, hidden in the big world, and at ease in the small world, and must also follow certain secret agreements, can only be shot in a certain heaven and earth catastrophe to change the trajectory of heaven and earth. The third kind is to fall into chaos completely. Disorder is the only order. In fact, there is a fourth result. But the big brother did not let Lu Qin go to observe the Tao, because the Tao is not Tao. Lu Qin guessed it. It is, heaven and earth are one. This is what Howrin Jason used to be, and then wild and careful, what he wanted to accomplish. Lu Qin rolled up his sleeves again, and after distracting the scene, he stretched out a jade-white palm with the back of the hand facing up and the palm facing down. If I change to me, it is show me. First of all, become one, make great practice one. Turning the palm of his hand, Lu Qin smiled and said, secondly, his body is 1,000,000,000 trillion. Then, it doesn't matter what kind of cultivating, proving, and prospering, there is no such worry. Lu Qin continued, and then Chen Pingon suddenly frowned slightly. Lu Qin gently bumped the pavilion with his head a few times, and said with a knowing smile, the incarnation that Pang Dao talked about is not only transformed into a spiritual being. The Confucian figure of Weishuang on the temples, his palms changed into fists, and he stretched out his hand to shake the bead in his heart. It was at this moment that the small town within the Lizhu cave that year was instantly like night. The immortal sitting on the top of the sea of clouds, like sitting on the top of a well, seemed to be overlooking the frog at the bottom of the well, with sarcasm and laughter. There is a word that vibrates like thunder, I will play with you first. With this, 12 flying swords pierced the sea of clouds from the sky and fell into the world. The golden giant opened a pair of pure golden eyes, and he was lazy, sitting cross-legged, with his fists on his knees, and a finger with his right fist. Flick your fingers. A flying sword pierced the imaginary arm of the Confucianist Faxiang's fist if he was ordered. The golden giant above the sea of clouds stretched out a finger in each of his hands. Every time the finger was raised and lowered, the finger was gently rotated, and there was a flying sword drawing an arc. The entire arm of the Confucianist's law was stabbed with thousands of holes by the flying sword. Splash the cold water of the spring breeze with a rain of flying swords. Numerous golden silk threads seep out from the sea of clouds. The thunder magic dragon in 3 colors, with bright electric light, intertwined 3 large nets, like a knife, to wipe away the Confucianism. At the same time, a great array of heaven and earth was formed, absorbing the spirit of heaven and earth frantically, isolating the Confucian scholar from the avenue of the awe-inspiring world, and at the same time preventing this person's feet from falling on the ground of Aquarius. Even if Confucian scholars are scholars in the world, the two who shot are by Yujing gods who have crossed the world. The time and place are right, and they can't be given to the former. The golden giant fell with a punch and directly punched the raised hand of the snow-white face. The palm of the latter's palm was smashed out of a big pit, and his palm broke and shattered. After that, his arm was smashed by the punch. Only half of his arm remained. The Confucian student's left hand was always held empty and motionless. However, from the fist of the virtual grip, to the arm to the shoulder, there have been chapters of the Thunder Method and Tao Tactics covered with treasures of green chapters, and every text that contains the true meaning of Thunder Method is as big as a house. The on the cloud joined together to make a sword tactic, slash down, and cut off the fist of the Confucian scholar from the shoulder. The broken arm was blown to pieces by those Dao Ju texts on the spot. With only half of his right arm left, the Confucianist raised it up and tilted it out again, blocking the bead like an umbrella to cover the rain, and at the same time he swept the bead back to protect him. Above the sea of clouds, the golden giant hit the head of the Confucianist with a fist. In a world of law formations, huge ripples of qi were stirred up. With every punch, the Confucianist's legal status fell by 1 point. The body has no arms, only a dangling fist that has no arms connected to the body. A terrible image is just to guard the remaining fist. The way of the scholar, his lips moved slightly, and he read silently, as if he was still in the school, facing the children with immature faces and clean eyes, and for those students who would call themselves Mr. Chi, the last lecture was given. The stars revolve, the sun and the moon pass the bamboo, the 4 eras are imperial, the yin and yang are greatly transformed, the wind and rain are beneficial, all things get their harmony and life, and each gets its cultivation. In the rural school without Mengtong, the Confucian scholars with frosty white temples are covered with snow-white heads. Qi orifices are bleeding and bloody. Finally, the soul is broken, not enough to support the body, like a piece of porcelain falling heavily to the ground, but it is broken silently, like a spring breeze in the world coming and going. It seems that from beginning to end, the Confucian scholars did not fight back, just parry. Taoism is not high enough. Has quietly entered the 14th realm, and had 3 natal characters at that time. Good temper. Wensheng's direct disciple, in fact, the best temper is left and right, and the worst is this one. It was the man who stepped Jingyang Mountain on the ground with 1 foot, and even the one who joked that Jiazi would step on Jingyang Mountain with 1 foot before. As the 3rd head of Baiyujing taught, Lu Chen's expression changed slightly. He wanted to speak a few times, but he stopped talking, and finally didn't say anything. Chen Pingan stood in the pavilion, looked into the distance, and said, "Don't pretend to be guilty, I know you." Lu Chen is not afraid of this at all. As expected, Lu Chen immediately recovered his calm expression, and said in a calm tone, "You shouldn't use your enthusiasm, you should borrow a Dao Fa." And the green shirt Gesht, who is no longer a straw shoe boy, also looked calm. Because all emotions are cut one by one. There is me Qi Jingchen in the world. Too happy. But I can only meet one Mr. Qi. The brother once said a word from right to left. Reasonable and useful, what do I do with swords? So practice sword. Being able to be in Suishan in the Middle Earth, tells Zhou Yu freely that I, Chen Pingan, will become a pure sword repairman in the 14th realm. In my life, Chen Pingan, through the mountains and rivers, must not just make a living, never just seek a living. So learn boxing. Only in that weird place, Chen Pingan, and that weird existence can finally say, a level higher than your fist. On the 12th floor of the 5th city of Baiyujing, Jiang Zhaomo, the owner of the Ziki Tower, is known as the 2nd master of Yudo, the highest swordsmanship, and also martial arts. In addition, the old city master who is proficient in Lei Fa, Pang Ding, has the title of Humbly. He has extremely old aptitude and long Dao age. He is known as the first person in the Qingming world to practice thunder technique. At the same time, he also practiced the 5 elements technique, all of which are extremely accomplished. And these 2 are all from the same line as the 2nd son of Taoism. Originally, Chen Pingan was destined to not be able to see this picture of time before he reached the 14th realm. Moreover, Lu Chen was kept in the dark about rechecking this picture scroll. In this way, Chen Pingan started to study the arithmetic of yin-yang family very early. In fact, it is true. Chen Pingan had said to the sword bearer many years ago that I might learn a little yin and yang technique in the future. Back then, when I first met a swordsman with a donkey wearing a hat and a donkey, I had a conversation with a boy in straw sandals. The young man said that there are some revenges that must be avenged. As long as there is no revenge for a day, then he will live for 100 years and he will be able to remember 96 years. The swordsman asked with a smile, "You have eaten the remaining 4 years." The boy replied stubbornly. "Before I was 5 years old, I had parents who were ignorant and didn't count." Chen Pingan raised his head and looked towards the sky. Big irregularities are small disrespect, Jiang Zhaomo and Pang Ding, when Chen Pingan, am in the Qingming world, you too will be careful when walking at night. The ship capsized in the gutter and died in the ditch, which is just a coffin. Therefore, the 3 empty coffins in the small building in the LV Gong temple site were actually Chen Pingan telling Lu Qin. 3 coffins, Jiang Xiaomo 1, Pang Ding 1, you do. As long as you Lu Qin don't lie down, it has nothing to do with you. Lu Chen stood up and smiled and said, understood. After this goodbye, the landscape is swaying, you and I, what do you say? Chen Pingan said, I do my own way. Sort of Coming Chapter 942. What if, do it your own way. Sure enough, it was sword practice, and the world was unfettered. Just when Chen Pingan was about to leave the pavilion, Lu Chen smiled and said, I heard that there is a mountain of pretentiousness on the side of Qingping sword sect. Chen Pingan nodded and said, Xianda Mountain is the master, and the 2 mountains are supplemented by the preparation and the clouds steaming. It is the pattern of the 3 mountains. Since Cui Dongshan is the next suzerain, naturally he has his own plans. According to Cui Dongshan, since the weather is about to change, it is time to plan ahead and plan ahead. Lu Chen also nodded, I couldn't land on Tonggishao before. Pang Dao just glanced at the sea from a distance. The monument was erected on the top of the mountain. The inscriptions on the monument, My Chow can't come out, and Heaven and Earth Purple Chi, are the inscriptions on the monument. His handwriting, however, no longer resembles the handwriting of embroidered tiger, but retains a bit of spirit. After leaving the yoke, according to the mountain, it is a kind of immortal. Lu Chen turned his head and smiled, Pan Dao is here, you have to congratulate your proud student Chao Sunny in advance. The retreat is successful, and the pill formation is between the 1st and 2nd grades. Countless possibilities. Chen Pingan was relieved and nodded, it's very good. The legendary 1st rank of pill formation is recognized as the qualification of ascension. It is rare, and the 2nd rank is the capital of the upper 5 realms. However, many of the great mountain monks who are now in the world, the golden pill rank at the beginning, is actually the 2nd rank. Taste. Lu Chen asked, about me, Qi Jingchen, Cui Yang, and Cui Dongshan, did they all tell you something, such as reminding you of the way to get along with me? Chen Pingan said, Mr. Qi just said, a gentleman can deceive him. The implication is that you, Lu Chen, or Bai Yujing's 3rd head teacher at that time, weren't enough to let Mr. Qi and the boy of Ni Ping Alley at that time confess anything deliberately. What's more, in this sentence, the biggest original intention, or Mr. Qi's hope, is to let Chen Ping know the truth in the future, not to be too guilty, not too guilty. Lu Chen whispered, Qi Jingchen doesn't care about anything, what do you care about Chen Pingan? If it weren't for you to be so hostile to Bai Yujing, you went to the Qingming world with what you did on the Great Wall of Jinchi, where you are not a guest. Take 10,000 steps and say, as long as you don't deal with the poor brother you, even if you just die with Jiang Xiaoma and Pang Ding, you will still be a distinguished guest on the 11th floor of the other 4 cities in the future. I don't know how many Bai Yujing's fairy sisters, how curious and admired they are for the youngest city engraver in the 10,000-year history hidden official Qin Shi. Chen Ping placed Ruo deaf, but said to himself, Cui Dongshan said, if your husband really has to deal with Bai Yujing in the future, he must follow the old cook's choice of vegetables and pick out a Lu Xin. Obviously, Cui Dongshan's meaning is very simple. If the husband wants to ask Jian Bai Yujing, it is best to bypass Lu Xin and cut the 3 masters of Bai Yujing from the whole Bai Yujing. Only with such an advance can the chances of winning come to an end. Master Hermit, the most important person, you can't omit it. Lu Qin smiled and said, Qi Jingchen is an upright gentleman, no matter how high he is, no matter how knowledgeable he is, he can't be a villain alone. Your brother, Cui Yang, is not the case. Chen Pingan asked with a smile. Besides the patriarch of the three teachings, Lu Qin also has people who are jealous? To the point where he needs to be jealous of what words this person said. Lu Qin looked serious and nodded. If Cui Yang is not distracted by the world and let him specifically target someone, then the person being targeted, even if it is Jing Juzhong will have to suffer, at least for each other. Because Cui Yang's behavior is similar to that of a poor man. Lu Qin squinted and smiled, clasped his fists in his hands, and shook lightly. I implore Master Yingguan to solve the doubts about the poor road. Chen Pingan said, you guessed it all, so why bother with my tongue? Cui Yang is ruthless. Lu Qin touched the lotus crown on the top of his head. Chen Pingan, you are too far behind Cui Yang. Cui Yang's plan was a trip to the wild hinterland led by the young hermit. After success, such as after Chen Pinganjian opened the Tuiyue mountain, before moving around of Mingyue Haocai into the Qingming world. Without warning, Chen Pingan suddenly joined forces with Ning Yao, Qi Tingji, criminal Haosou, and Lu Ji. Let's get rid of Lu Qin. In addition to Lu Ji's natal flying sword, only the attacking strength can be regarded as an ascending realm sword repairman. Then it's Chen Pingan plus 4 ascended realms, Jianxiu. Outside the Qingming world and by Yujing, encircled and suppressed a Lu Qin of the 14th realm. Lu Qin sighed. This is the last time Cui Yang appeared in the Great Wall of Sword Qi and told you about this plan. And with your realm at the time, it is difficult to hide from the sky. Cui Yang must have used some unique secret method long ago. Having said this, let you forget it, and finally let you remember it at a certain moment, so that you can turn your face with me in an instant, cross the river and tear down the bridge, and violently kill people. Even leaving aside Chen Pingan, who is returning to the realm, only talks about a joint siege with 4 ascending sword repairs, especially an old sword fairy with lettering on the city's head, and a new world co-master. Coupled with Lu Ji's natal flying sword Beidou, the criminal officer Haosu would not consider his life or death when he asked people about the sword. And at a certain critical moment, Chen Ping's 2 natal flying swords might be the winners and losers. Who can stand it? Chen Pingan was silent and did not deny, but actually admitted. As for why Chen Pingan made up his mind not to do this, it was because there was a trial, and finally unexpectedly, Chen Pingan got a certain result. At that time, Chen Pingan said something. On this trip to the barren hinterland, the guardian who walked with the hidden official Chen Pingan was awe-inspiring. Lu Qin replied sincerely with a solemn expression. Haoran Lu Xin, fortunately to be with you. At that moment, Chen Pingan was extremely certain that Lu Qin had not faked anything. A three-handed master who had been in by Yujing for thousands of years truly recognized his Haoran status and was willing to regard Haoran Tianxia as real. Hometown. Lu Qin glanced at Chen Pingan. Fortunately, this guy is more like Qi Jingchen, who is not like Cui Yang. In the final analysis, compared with the basic knowledge passed down by the old scholars, Cui Yang can study this knowledge to the extreme, and Chen Pingan it just barely learned a similarity, which is half of Cui Yang's character, so the remaining half is not something that Chen Pingan can learn if he wants to learn. Since the hermit is so sincere to others, it is not easy to hide and tempt the poor Dao. Lu Qin lifted a sleeve and put his fingers together, and 2 women, as small as mustard seeds, appeared, walking around Liangzhu. One of the women was holding Kaoun's hair in a bun, showing great demeanor, and the other was wearing a green skirt with a lotus root and white shirt, and stepped on a pair of embroidered shoes. It was the 2 incense-burning women who walked out of the Yidong gate of the Fen shrine. When Lu Qin first saw the 2 girls afterwards, he silently said that it was pear blossoms and apricot blossoms. This means that Chen Pingan has tried his best to ask Lu Qin to enter the urn, whether it is true or true, false or false, depending on whether Lu Qin's mood is good or bad, and whether he tells it or not. Only because Chen Pingan, who stood by the pool and waited for the rabbits and then caught the turtles in the urn, was the caged bird in Lu Chen's sleeve. It seems that the mantis is catching the cicada and the oriole is behind, but in fact the slingshot is down. But Chen Pingon seemed to have anticipated this a long time ago, and there was no ups and downs in Taoism, and Gu Jing did not wave. Lu Chen asked, "Did Qi Tingji ever quietly remind you that he was willing to help?" With Cui Yang's method, there must be sufficient reasons to convince Qi Tingji early to make the old sword immortal willingly sacrifice the soldier solution and send Lu Xun on the road. Chen Pingon still didn't speak. Lu Qin leaned against the pillars of the pavilion. "Chen Pingon, speak with conscience, tell yourself, do you want to be afraid of this embroidered tiger?" Chen Pingon was silent for a long time, and said, "I have always heard that you have 5 dreams and 7 mental states, each of which has a great way to manifest, butterfly." Lu Qin moved his sleeves with both hands and smiled. This kind of unique skill at the bottom of the box can't be easily shown to others. Before, a young and energetic, hot-blooded person who cares about his head, I will borrow you to do the Dao Fa, but of course the poor Dao has to be a little bit. Feng Shan, once you get caught by a guy like you who likes to think about things, the consequences will be disastrous. Speaking of this, Lu Qin said tentatively, Pan Dao's saying off thinking about the east and thinking about the west is a pun, can you hear it? Lu Qin was saying that the purple air came from the east, Taoism was in the east, the Buddhist kingdom in the west, and Buddhism was in the west. In the middle ground. Chen Pingon squinted at Lu Xun. Lu Chen sighed, how can I talk to idiots like fellow Taoists Qing Tong and Taoist Nen for too much, so that poor Dao always feels that he doesn't speak thoroughly, it's like talking in vain. Sure enough, I'm still chatting with you, after all, it doesn't take much effort. Chen Pingon smiled and said, I heard that Dao Chang's son has a wonderful evaluation of you. Lu Qin hugged the back of his head with both hands, and said lazily, it's the seemingly repetitive Lu Chen can't beat anyone. If you switch to Lu Qin, no one can beat Lu Qin, and no one can beat Lu Qin. In fact, the meaning is very simple. Chen Pingon slowly said, Meng Confucian Jingwan, greedy for his own power, finally chose to commit suicide. In the dream, the skull relapses into the dream, despising the joy of being king in the south. The oak tree is alive, the dreaming turtle is dead, and the dream is turning into a butterfly. I don't know who is who. These 5 dreams have their own avenues and manifestations. Among them, the real Bone who walks under the sky is the most obvious. But at the beginning, according to the historical records of the Summer Palace and the Confucian Temple, it seems that the whole building is green. Ming Tianxia doesn't know that you have 5 more mysterious dreams besides the 7 things in your mind. In order to not have to fight with people, I have to show some strength so that the other party will retreat in the face of difficulties, so as not to hurt the peace. Lu Qin smiled and raised his hand, bent his elbow a few times, and said, a lot of meaningless disputes, what are you most afraid of? I'm afraid that one party has already felt completely torn, and he is full of mines. I don't think so, but no one believes it. Is there any greater grievance in the world than this? The earliest 3 masters of Qingming world took turns in charge of Bai Yujing for 100 years. Lu Qin seemed to be the one who had nothing to do, but after all, he was a communist who had been in charge of the world for 100 years in name. The undercurrent surging in it was completely imaginable. Moreover, according to Bai Yujing's rules, once a certain brother instructs the world, the other 2 should never interfere in any affairs. It is rumored that this is a rule set by the Taoist ancestor himself. This means that Lu Qin, who likes to leave Bai Yujing and travel long distances alone, will be slaughtered on the road and completely dead. Then the whole Qingming world will appear, the dragons have no head, and the world has no owner, and the other 2 masters were still unable to take action. No matter how chaotic the world was, they would have to wait until the set hour before they could take over by Yujing and come forward to clean up the mess. Chen Pingan asked, Meng Confucian Jingwan, who was greedy for his own power, chose to commit suicide in the end. He could only dream of cedars and cypresses. You, the ancestor of the Liu family, are insinuating against the Liu family of Yin and Yang. Zhou Zi. Liu Tai was born in the Liu family of Yin-Yang family, one of the two preaching mentors. Besides swordsman Pei Min, the other is Zhou Zi, who does everything in heaven. Zhou Zi talks about the sky and Liu's talk about the land is recognized by the vast world, and Zhou Zi is reputed to monopolize half of the Yin and Yang family, and it is the consensus on the mountain. Zhou Zi is very respectful of Liu Tai, otherwise there would be no sword repair Liu Kai. But after Liu Tai met Chen Pingan that year, Liu Tai seemed to have a big disagreement with his mentor Zhou Zi, and this matter was finally distinguished from Confucianism and Moism by Jing Zhong and his younger brother, one of the 5 dreams of Liu Xin, somewhat similar. It is true that I am different from Zhou Zidao. Liu Qin waved his hand quickly, disassociating himself from the relationship and said, It's just that the poor Wei doesn't have this ability. I can accurately predict that in the future, there will be the most unfilial descendant of the ancestor, Liu Tai, and you. Chen Pingan said, I answered your 3 questions earlier. Liu Chen blinked, isn't it a problem? Liu Chen hesitated, before I went to set up a stall in Lizhu Cave, I withdrew my 2 dreams one mind from Qingming world, and when I reached Haran world, before I entered Lizhu Cave, I withdrew my mind again. You should have guessed about the latter, otherwise you won't ask Pindao, the source of the Xie of one of the ancestors of Chengligia, the 8 deities. In addition, it is indeed related to the Robe Jinli and Longhushan Tiancher mansion. To be honest, the more poor Dao stays in Baiyujing, the more he is more inclined to the phrase there are monsters at work, there must be Longhushan Taoist. I find it interesting, hoping to unlock the basis of the word xian based on this. For example, a person with relatively ordinary aptitude for Taoism is faster in the mountain, but the height of Taoism is limited. It's still, people, slower, but the avenue's achievements are higher, so I want to experience this experience personally as a Huangzi nobleman, and finally this person sits in an island grotto near Jialonggu. Hua, the soldiers are resolved. But even if Pan Dao takes back the 2 dreams and 1 mind in 1 breath, even if there has been a deduction and evolution that has paid enough attention to that Lizhu Dongtian. Liu Qin showed a somewhat melancholy expression, and said helplessly, facts have proved that the poor road is still big, and Qi Jingchen is underestimated. If I knew it, it was time to take back the real bone man who tried to dominate the guest, it belongs to him. He is the most rebellious and rebellious. You are going to be the emperor. This guy is good. He has cultivated the Tao for 3,000 years. He has been tirelessly seeking only one thing, which is to create his own rebellion. It is no wonder that he will dazzle with our gentleman, Yao Qing. Master Liu can be called the second one. Before I went to the Great Wall of Jianqi to find you, so as not to overturn the boat in the gutter and the good things turn into bad things, I took care of myself, so I took back my dream and my mind. They were the Confucian teacher Jing Chu in the dream, and the stunned wood chicken in the lotus roots. Usually, I met with Liu Tai by the way, and we had a very happy conversation. We had a good conversation. Chen Pingan smiled and said, it seems that I have to listen to my student's reminder. Liu Chen asked back, the third answer is, do you want to ask the poor Dao to return to the Qingming world, what else you want to take back, or you want to ask the poor Dao's retraction, whether it is dream interpretation or mental state, their fate, what is it? The latter. Get a kind of freedom that is no longer implicated in puppets. Whoever is who is, it's not me Liu Chen anyway. In fact, regarding Liu Chen, there is actually another argument from Xian Duguan, but it is relatively less popular than Sun Daichang's golden words. Lu Chen is not a real person. What you see in your eyes is not true. Chen Pingon suddenly asked a shocking question, that Mr. Xing from Beidasheng. Isn't it one of your 5 dreams and 7 attitudes? Lu Chen was dull and speechless. Wasn't his head clamped by the door panel to ask this kind of question? If I am not wrong, you Do must threaten with words before you return to Haoran and enter the Lizhu cave. After you, just like I threatened Taoist Nen before. Why, did Master Lu didn't hear what I was saying, or did he pretend to be stupid? Lu Qin rubbed his face with both hands, and Peng Dao still preferred to chat with fellow young fellows or tender Taoists. In fact, both sides knew it well, but they didn't bother to say something wrong. As long as Chen Ping'an asks Jian Bai Yujing in the future, no matter what the reason is, Yu Do, the second instructor of Bai Yujing, will never stand idly by. Chen Pingon squinted his eyes and said, "Understood." Lu Chen looked surprised and said, "Huh? Why do you learn to speak poorly?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, "No wonder you would say more of these extra words. It turns out that King Ming's world is already full of internal worries. Otherwise, a self who is not an upper 5-level sword repairer now, there is no need to make a self-proclaimed, understand, Lu Qin, so much trouble. Far more than. The difficulty of asking Jian Bai Yujing was much more difficult than asking Jian Tuoi Washan. So it is extremely possible that Dao Chang's son has quietly entered the 14th realm, and he is a pure sword repairer. Wu Shuangjiang's presence on the night ship was tantamount to a tugu, and even began to restore a certain identity. And Sui Chugong Wu Shuangjiang, he has the status of a Taoist official who goes to the countryside to follow the customs, but don't forget that the Lord Wu is a sergeant monk who can accompany the martial arts temple. On that battlefield, will you pay attention to benevolence and justice? As for Xuandu Temple, when dealing with disputes on the mountain, it is even more famous that we single you out, and you single out a group of us. So Sun Guanzhu and Wu Shuangjiang jointly asked Jian Bai Yujing. To be precise, they were actually asking Jian Yudo alone. Chen Pingon asked, after returning to Bai Yujing, will you interpret dreams if you can interpret your dreams, and all your minds that can be acquainted? Lu Chen helplessly said, there is nothing to do, poor Dao is after all Master's most distressed disciple. Chen Pingon smiled and said, then I won't say the kind words that resemble a good voyage. Lu Shenmei said, as today, thanks to the poor Taoist master, the term Taoist has been exclusively used by Taoism for 10,000 years. Chen Pingon frowned and said, after 10,000 years, take 10,000 steps and say that there will be no one who cultivates the Taoist school. By then, your Taoist knowledge will not be too weak. It is impossible to say that there will be a culture and education roots. It is said that, in any case, just as sentence off doing nothing, people of any status, especially emperors, generals and ministers, must be highly respected. Lu Chen sullen his face. Chen Pingon rolled his eyes and said, laugh if you want to laugh. How can I compare my knowledge of extrapolation and arithmetic with you masters? Lu Chen laughed loudly, and finally put his smile away. In today's world, the word Jiangu has changed a lot, and forgotten in the rivers and lakes has changed accordingly. But after 10,000 years, will there be no rivers and lakes? The water is all dry, like fish on land, can only be moistened by each other. Lu Chen was talking about the arrival of the Dharma era, and he only talked about one thing, the world under the common people, no longer able to practice, the spiritual energy of the world is exhausted like the sea dry, and all living beings are like swimming fish on the land. Then the Confucianism today is near, the Buddhism is broad, and the Taoism is high. What will happen after 10,000 years? It's hard to see how the Taoist priests live and die, and see where the Taoism goes. Regarding this matter, not only Lu Chen, senior brother Ko Ming, and master, each had their own deductions. It's just that Lu Chen didn't want to worry about the sky. It was relatively shallow, just used to play the luminous shadow, but the brother wanted to find a real way to crack it. As for how the master thinks, it is estimated that it will be deeper, better, and higher than the senior. Chen Pingan asked, is it worried about the embarrassing situation? Offie is not high, but low is not good. High is still high, just a layer is missing in the middle. Lu Chen sat up and shook his sleeves. The old saying is that it's up to people to get things done. It's really discouraging. Since cultivating Taoism is a matter of 30 minutes, I want to do so much. Lu Chen suddenly said, Chen Pingan, if I see the Most Holy Master later, the Most Holy Master will probably ask you a question. Chen Pingan asked, how do you tell? Lu Chen smiled and said, for example, ask how you think about the 3/4 controversy. Chen Pingan nodded, it's possible. Lu Chen asked, couldn't the Most Sage Master already ask you? Chen Pingan said, how do you think I should answer? Lu Chen said, difficult. It is no problem to raise one's own Wenxing line, and slightly depreciate the sub-sage line. It is no problem to be in love with selfishness, but there is a big problem in being fair and reasonable. But it is even more wrong to say that Chen Pingan does not speak for his orthodox context, or that he blindly rejects the sub-sage line. If it is said that one answer is both good, this kind of mash-up answer, can't it be treated as a joke by the elders of the Most Holy Master? Lu Chen smiled and said, why don't you just bypass the 3/4 controversy? But it's not really bypassing Wenxing Yaxing's two-line learning. Chen Pingan nodded and said, something makes sense. Lu Chen helplessly said, what about sincerity? What is the good manner of the monk Luopishan who has always treated people with sincerity? Tell me, what is your answer? Chen Pingan said, Z said. Lu Chen immediately answered, is there any kind of education? Chen Pingan nodded. Lu Chen gave a thumbs up, and said in amazement, neither does he downplay the sub-sage line, but he infinitely uplifts the Most Sage Master, and he secretly stamps the Wenxing line over the sub-sage line by half. It's yours. After hearing this, senior brother Jun Qian could only smile and be very happy. He would only feel that he has the roots of his great power, and there is such a magical effect. Chen Pingan said, I don't really think like this in my heart, do I dare to say that? Lu Chen was silent for a moment, and had to nod his head, that's right. Knowing this a long time ago, poor Dao should be cruel, and knocked this kid directly into a sap-set sack to buy Yujing as a junior. Lu Chen looked up at the sky, it's going to rain. Chen Pingan took the lead out of the pavilion. Before leaving his hometown, the straw shoe boy in Ni Ping Alley left the town. Old man Yang from the drugstore once reminded him to leave the backyard with the umbrella and hand it to the schoolmaster. One big and one small, walk in the rain together under an umbrella. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.